Welcome to another live stream. Apologies about the delay. I will explain a bit in a minute. I'm just waiting to see if everything is okay. Hopefully it is. My audio's coming through. Okay, I think everything looks all good. Right, so yeah, again, apologies for the delay. So yeah, what I was doing was also anyone watching, please say hello in the chat, just so I know everything is working, because I was a bit last minute, so I just want to make sure everything's okay. Cool. So yeah, basically the debate that we're going to be reacting to, I've had like audio issues in the past, so I thought like, oh, I'll export it, and I just didn't get time to earlier in the day, and then I tried to do it right before the stream, and it was taking a bit of a while. But it's exported now on boosted volume, so if the actual YouTube version is a bit quiet, then we can use the backup version I've got. Great, thanks for confirming, Cami and Danielle as well. So yeah, welcome Cami, Monk, Danielle, and Leave It. Monk says that they are a vegan antinatalist from Bangladesh. What a legend. Cool. So we actually have a donation. No, the there's maybe some issues with the stream. Let me just check some stuff. Yeah, so can anyone notice any issues with the stream? Because I'm getting issues. I'm getting told there's issues, but I actually can't see any issues. Welcome VLAM, welcome Alden. Alden, top legend. Yeah, I don't notice any issues, so I'm going to just keep going. If people notice issues, then please tell me in the chat. But it seems fine to me. Cool. Okay, so yeah, I can't remember exactly where I was. But so anyway, I can't remember what I was saying, but I'll just start again. So yeah, sometime this week. Cool. Your messages are now coming through in bursts, but you're all saying there's no issues, so that should be fine. Cool. So yeah, earlier on this week, there was a debate between George Martin and Emily Walsh. So George is known as Carnism Debunked. Emily, I believe, has rebranded to just her name, but used to be known as Slightly Crazy Vegan. And let me... Actually, before we get to that, this is what I was going to go on to. There was already a donation before the stream had even started, so we're going to replay that. And
we bring children in this world, and we raise them to be warriors against evil.
So yeah, that was, first of all, thank you so much to the person who sent in that donation. They said you should have seen it on screen. I'm sorry I won't be able to watch the live reaction today, but should be a good one, so I look forward to watching it later. I hope it is a good one and your time is not wasted. But yeah, the debate was an interesting one, so we'll get into it, but thank you so much for the donation. So if anyone else would like to send in a donation to help support, cover the costs of the channel, if you appreciate the stuff I do, then you can do that with, it's even, the link is in the description or the pinned message in the chat. So yes, so let's get on to the actual debate. So it was between, let me share my screen. I've put myself in the center this time because I thought it actually might be easier. And oh, hang on a minute, I've zoomed out the thing. Let me just get it back into how it should be. There we go. Yep. So this is George, Carnism Debunked. So he hosted the debate. Now, George has been doing animal rights stuff for a few years now. He does all sorts of stuff on his channel. He does lives loads of the time. So, like, that's the live we're going to be reacting to. But he does loads of stuff. So his channel is well worth checking out. The woman he was... So George is mostly does vegan stuff, but he also is an antinatalist. So he occasionally does antinatalist stuff. He's actually been doing a bit more than usual recently. And anyway, so he was debating Emily Walsh, formerly known as Slightly Crazy Vegan. I think that was her former name. Anyway, so yeah, you can see here, Slightly Crazy Vegan. So she also runs a YouTube channel. She does other stuff as well. And she, I think, I'm actually not as familiar with her stuff. I think she mostly does vegan stuff, but she also does like feminism content. But I've got to admit, I have not gone through like her back catalogue, so I don't know exactly what she does all the time. Okay, she's only had one live stream. So, yeah, so the interesting thing about this is that I believe like both George and Emily have been around in the vegan world for like a while and doing content online. And George is obviously an antinatalist. Emily, I didn't really know if she had any particular opinions on this topic at all until this live stream. And then they did this live stream, and it turns out that she is very heavily pregnant, and suggested to George to do this debate because she knew his views. So yeah, I don't think there's really any more background context to go over. So we could actually just go straight into the debate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by playing it through the online version here. And then if the volume is not good enough, then we'll move on to my backup version. But before we start, I'm just going to say hello to a few more people in the chat. So is there anyone else new? So V Lam, I can't remember if I said hello to you, but hello if I didn't. Olawale, Robert, I think that's everyone who's in the chat for now. There are 28 people watching. If you haven't said hello, please do so. It's nice to see who's in the chat and where you're from. Actually, it'd be cool to hear like what countries people are from, whereabouts in the world you are, and please obviously like the stream as well. So then it promotes it to more people. More people can get sucked into the antinatalist bubble. Oh, it's not a bubble, but you know what I mean. Cool. Okay. All right. So let's have a quick go at this and see if the volume is okay. Please let me know if the volume is not all right.
All right. We're live, everyone. We've got Emily Walsh on here. Emily, it's so great to see you. It's been a long time.
Another thing is, because it's a 2-hour debate, which is a long one, I've put it on 1.25.
Since we've spoke live to each other in a way like this, or because yeah, for anyone who watches my channel, it's all good between me and Emily. We're friends, don't worry, it's all good. We've collabed and stuff on videos together. We've done plenty of vegan focused stuff, and we always speak to each other about vegan.
Oh, actually, there was one thing I was going to do before we started. Sorry to tease you. This book just arrived for me. I don't know if you can see that. Should We Go Extinct? A Philosophical Dilemma for Our Unbearable Times by Todd May. It's a pretty short book. Like, it's a pretty small book. Like, you can see my hand against it there. Like, it's not a regular sized book. It's a bit smaller. And it's quite thin as well. And I've just started it. I'm on like page 29. So far, like, it's enjoyable. There's not been anything like groundbreaking or anything, but I'm not that far into it. So cool. And then Anon has joined the chat from the UK. My brother or sister in Countryhood or whatever it's called. Robert's US. Danielle is in Scotland. Oh, there's a couple of well, I say a couple. Well, yeah, a couple of regular viewers from Scotland. So there's a few antinatalists in Scotland at the very least, but I'm sure there's more than I'm aware of. VLAM is in Hong Kong. Interesting. I don't know if I've had a viewer from Hong Kong before, but thank you for joining. Cool. Okay, the volume, I'm hearing from VLAM, the volume is a bit low. Okay, so let's just go on to the backup version, because I think that's just going to be easier for all of us. Okay, cool. Give me a second to get it up. That's not what she said, but I guess what he said. Cool. Okay. Right. Right. I'm just going to need to set this up. Boom. Got George's face in. There's Emily. And there we are. Actually, okay. I think that's good enough for now, isn't it? Let's just keep it like that. Okay, George is in the chat and he's saying that volume is fine. Okay, now he's retracted his message, so maybe it's not fine. Okay, cool. All right, let's start again.
All right, we're live, everyone.
That seems a lot louder, so I'm going to bring that down a bit. Just let me know how the volume is.
We've got Emily Walsh on here. Emily, it's so great to see you. It's been a long time since we've spoke live to each other in a way like this, or because for anyone who watches my channel, it's all good between me and Emily.
Oh, and Emily's in the chat as well. So we've got both George and Emily watching me watch them. So hopefully I don't embarrass myself between the two originals.
Emily, we're friends. Don't worry, it's all good. We've collabed and stuff on videos together. We've done plenty of vegan focused stuff, and we always speak to each other about veganism and stuff like that. But today we're going head to head on a topic that we don't have the same opinion on. So we're going to be talking today about antinatalism, and obviously one of the things that might make this stream slightly more enticing to the viewer is well, tell us your situation, Emily. Tell us about you.
So I'm currently 31 weeks pregnant.
There it is.
Yeah.
It's just quite funny how George, as an antinatalist, is just like, there it is, you know, the sight to behold.
I got bigger now. I actually started to look like definitely a pregnant lady.
Yep.
In the beginning of my third trimester. So due in October, having a baby girl. And I'm really excited. And I've wanted to have a baby my whole life. So, since I was like an adult. And I'm really happy to finally have my first child, and I plan to have more. So.
Yeah, and your experience is, I guess, different from mine. I did until I was about 20. I'm going to say 20.
So I just increased the speed to 1.25 because I remembered it had gone back to normal when I'm using this version. And I think it cut out slightly there, but George basically just said that I think he used to want kids as well.
25, which is when I first came across antinatalism. And then once I got looking into the arguments about that, I was no longer convinced that it was the ethical thing to do or that I wanted to do it. And I decided to have a vasectomy in 2020. So two very contrasting life experiences there for both of us. And I just want to say before I start the debate, even though I'm a hard antinatalist and I'm very passionate about this subject, it's not about any hatred or anything towards vegans who do have kids or who are choosing to have kids or anything like that. Many of the dearest people to me in the animal rights community are parents or are natalists. So it's not about any kind of hatred to any of you or anything like that. It's just that I personally think that this is ethically a questionable thing to do, and we'll be going into that today in the debate.
Yeah, I think that's super important. And like you can tell just from how George is, right, that he's not here with any animus or anything like that. And I think it's important for a couple of reasons, really. I mean, one, hating people who are going to or have kids is just not it's not productive. It's not going to get you anywhere. It's not nice for them. It's not nice for you. It's not nice for, I mean, maybe I can't speak for everyone, but like at least for me, and I would assume a lot of other people, it's not good, it's not healthy for you to be angry all the time, right? And I like, even though I have very strong beliefs with like veganism, antinatalism, I try not to get like really emotionally I have in the past, but like I try not anymore to get like really emotionally invested in conversations I'm having with people or debates I'm having with people, for a couple of reasons. Like, you know, it's just not like good to get emotionally invested in every single conversation you're having and then like have this emotional fallout afterwards if you don't convince them. And also it's like, if you don't convince them, there's like billions of people, like you could just go on to the next person and try to convince them. But yeah, so I don't think having like animus towards people who like are procreating or are intending to procreate is healthy. I don't think it's useful. Yeah, and I just don't think it's necessary as well. It's just like, it's not necessary. You'll just burn way more bridges than you actually need to.
Debate and yeah, basically after coming across many of the antinatalist arguments, reading into the antinatalist literature and philosophy, it's definitely something that I'm very strongly against now, the idea of humans procreating. So we can go into that in a bit. Emily, how did you want to do this?
And I was kind of the same as George. Like, I quite strongly wanted children, and then came across antinatalism and the arguments for it, and changed my mind. And my sort of desire to have children faded over time after that.
Do you want to like open up with your point in the debate, or do you want me to open up and we'll go from there? Or is there any way you wanted to particularly start this?
Yeah, I'm not really sure on. I can't remember the antinatalist debates. I haven't listened to them in a long time, but I kind of remember them.
For the best.
Yeah, I actually.
A lot of debates, not just antinatalist ones, just descend into absolute horseshit.
Because me and Patricia Nunes we're really close friends, and so like she lives in Sydney as well.
So just for anyone who doesn't know, Patricia is also does like vegan YouTube. Although I'm not sure she's as active anymore. I haven't really checked her channel. But she goes by... she used to go by That Vegan Lawyer. I think she just goes by her name now. But I did actually have a debate with her quite a while ago now, which you can just go on my channel, go to the debates playlist, and it's like one of the first ones. Yeah, it will have her name or That Vegan Lawyer in the title if you want to find it.
So we meet up a bit, but she's very busy with her PhD. But we have met up and we have discussed like the antinatalist, because she used to be antinatalist and now she's the opposite. Now she's seen evidence, for pronatalist, and now she's decided she doesn't want to have kids personally, but she thinks that other people should have kids. So we've discussed that. We've discussed like the differences. So I have some ideas of, because I know like I know I've had some antinatalists say some pretty mean things to me, and I know you're not like that, so that's why I'm cool with the debate, because I know it's more about like a logical thing rather than like personal attacks and stuff. Like I've had.
Yeah, no one should be getting into like personal attacks and stuff like that. It's just it's not useful. Again, it's just like not nice for the person. It's not nice for you to constantly be like. I can imagine it would take a mental toll on someone to be in that state of mind of just wanting to like verbally attack people all the time. So it's best to like keep things civil, keep things productive, stuff like that.
I've had antinatalists say like, because they said that I should adopt, and the thing is that in Australia it's extremely difficult. I wouldn't be eligible because it's very competitive, and I wouldn't be eligible to adopt. And I told him that, and they said, oh, well, obviously if you're not eligible to adopt, then you wouldn't make a good parent. And I'm like, that has nothing to do with it. It's just...
Yeah, I think they might have misunderstood then, because if she's saying that there's just too high demand, maybe she's not... I don't know the full situation, but maybe her not being eligible is the wrong phrasing. Maybe it was just that she's like so far back in the queue that she's not being like considered yet. I mean, I don't know if that is like the correct framing, but it sounds more like there were too many people wanting to adopt and not enough children needing adoption, rather than there's some, character flaw in her that means she can't adopt a child, like she isn't eligible to adopt a child. But I don't know.
Just because it's high competition. Like if there was all of a sudden all these children that needed to be adopted and there wasn't enough people, they wouldn't be as strict, right? So that really hurt me. That was upsetting. But I know you're not like that, so that's good. And I've had some. So I'll tell you a little bit more about how I became pregnant. So I tried to find someone, but I couldn't find anyone, and I ended up.
Right. So Emily's just said in the chat that it's about earnings. So it's about the amount of money you earn. Okay, cool. Okay, that makes sense.
Getting pregnant through donor. So I have a donor, and some people, especially very conservative people, they don't like that because they're like, oh, so you're raising a child without a father. They're going to end up messed up. And I actually have a relationship with intimate relationship. I have a friendship with the donor, and he's going to have a relationship, a non-father figure relationship with the child. So he's not going to, he's more going to be like the uncle because I want her to know her biological father. But yeah, I've had some people kind of say like, oh, you should have adopted. And it's like the same kind of thing. Like, yeah, that's great. But like, I'm not eligible and I don't have the money. So, because it's like at least 20 grand, like upfront. And if you have a child, it doesn't cost 20 grand. Like, they're like, oh, well, it costs money. I'm like, no, it doesn't. I think it'll be better if you say anyway, I just thought I'd give some background.
Cool, yeah, no, that was good. Thanks for that. Yeah, and I can open up then if you want, that's fine.
Yeah, because then I can go off what your arguments are, because there's so many different things to do with like why people shouldn't have children. Like you probably know that it's like, oh, the environment, but like it's an ethical thing, not about, the impact on the environment and the also like certain like family structures and stuff. So so that's why you should open up.
Cool. Yeah, and I just want to also preface by saying, obviously we don't want any stuff like that, personal attacks or anything like that. However, I will be saying stuff in the stream that will be indirectly, ultimately offensive to parents out there, because by the nature of antinatalist debates, that is just what's going to happen.
I already know.
People just get triggered by antinatalists when we just mentioned that the idea, the very presence of an it's like being a vegan, right? The very
So the disclaimer that George is making now for him also applies to me.
Presence of someone in the room who says it's ethically questionable that you're doing this or that you've done this, even though they're not trying to offend you in any way, it will ultimately maybe come across as a bit triggering or offensive in any way. So for the people watching, I'm not trying to attack anyone personally or anything like that. That includes Emily. But obviously, as an antinatalist, I'm going to say some things that people might be like, oh, that was offensive that he said that or whatever. But that's just the very nature of it.
No one likes to be seen as the bad guy.
Right. So it's just a contentious topic by that nature. Okay, right. I'll open up then and we'll go from there. I basically see there as being no good reason to create well-being from nothing. I think it's more important that we prevent suffering from nothing, if that makes sense. I think we have an obligation to not create suffering, but there's no obligation to create well-being. I don't think it matters about creating happiness, creating joy from nothing, anything like that. For me, the main concern is actually stopping from suffering from coming into existence. And there are many, I think, vegan contradictions when it comes to having.
Yeah, so just very quickly on that. So I feel like that's a pretty intuitive view to like a lot of people. Often, like I or other people will use the example of like you have two couples, they both are like prospective parents, or they're both like both couples are pregnant. And they both go to a clinic to get like a screening and stuff for hereditary diseases and stuff like that. And one couple finds out that their child will have some hereditary disease that, causes their life to be very short and brutal. And most people would look at that and say, well, that's a reason like not to create that child. Like that would be a bad thing to create that child. That those parents should not create that child. And then you have the other couple, they get a similar screening, but it comes out that their child will have some hereditary abnormality that means that actually their child will have an unusually good life, not an unusually bad one, an unusually good life. And when most people look at that, I think that most people would say, well, okay, that's like if they do have the child, then that's a good thing. The child will have that abnormality, so they have an unusually good life given they've been created. But that the child, if they were created having that abnormality, is not a reason to create the child. And the parents wouldn't do a bad thing if they don't have the child. So it's not like, given that they know they carry this like gene that will give the child this abnormality, that it doesn't then follow that the parents should have the child, like it would in the other circumstance of the parents shouldn't have the child if the child were going to have an unusually bad life. And I think that's the asymmetry that George is getting at. I agree with him. Like, I don't think there is a reason to create new people to experience happiness or well-being, just because the only reason they would stand to benefit from such things would be because they've got a desire or a need for that stuff. But that desire and need for those like happiness and associated things is created upon creating the child. So those interests and needs aren't in existence to be appealed to as a reason to create the child, because when you're thinking about creating the child doesn't exist, the needs and desires don't exist, so they can't be appealed to as a reason to create the child, if you get what I mean. And the things that you could point to saying that's a form of happiness that I want my child to experience, well, actually, with respect to your child, like, it doesn't make sense to me to say those things would bring happiness and blah, blah, blah. Or they would once they exist, but it wouldn't make sense to appeal to the happiness generated by those activities to create the child, because those things only become of value to the child once they exist, if you get what I mean. So that there's no value you can attach to those things before the child has been created. And in my view, there just seems to be a fundamental like value asymmetry in that even before a child exists, the bad things can be appealed to, unlike in the case where like the good things can't be appealed to. Some people just come down to like different values. They do like have this intuitive sense of like, you know, they are symmetrical, but for me, they just are not symmetrical in any way.
A child, for example, the fairly high likelihood that our kid will not be vegan, or at least if your kid is vegan, that they will.
Sorry, I don't know how long my sound was gone for. Should be back, but I accidentally tapped the mute button.
In this world, and we raise them to be warriors against evil.
Yeah, I accidentally tapped the. Yeah, I'm back. I accidentally tapped the mute button. I don't know how long I was on mute for. That's kind of annoying. I forget what I said. You missed everything I said. For fuck's sake. I'm not going over it again. That would just be so long. Anyway, sorry. In that meantime, we've had a donation. Thank you so much to the person who donated. It really helps support the channel. And they say, so appreciate you educating people about antinatalism. I can't even say the word correctly. Antinatalism. Keep up the good work, Lawrence. Thank you so much. And I will keep on doing what I'm doing. Much more stuff to come. Yeah, apologies about that sound issue. That was my bad. I accidentally hit the mute button on the microphone. Yeah, basically, I was just like explaining why I support what George was saying, in that there's a value asymmetry. And then also, even if there's no value asymmetry and we value pain and pleasure in the same ways, I think there's just an overriding priority to avoid or reduce suffering over bestowing pleasure or happiness on someone.
Then have kids themselves, because 95% of people go on to procreate and then their kid might not be vegan, and then their kid, and then their kid. And so ultimately, by procreating, we could essentially create an endless chain of carnists who are willing to wage war on the animals and violate essentially our own interests. And I don't really see any good justification for bringing children into the, let's face it, shit system that we have. And I think even most natalists kind of do agree with that. They would agree that the current system we have, even for humans, even though it's nicer times than we have lived in before, it's still not great. We're going to be spending most of our days at work.
Yeah, and also, like, even though society now is in many ways better than it was, say, 100, 200 years ago, the ways in which it is better are only that they, like, cater for certain needs or resolve certain problems that are brought into existence by us perpetuating our species. So, for example, like, we have modern medicine, but there would be no need for modern medicine if we simply didn't procreate. Like, it doesn't seem like a valuable thing or a good thing to create a child so they can use modern medicine, because the only reason they need it is because they were created in the first place.
At school, whatever it is, and then retirement, and then we're going to die of... Basically, our current system is this: school, work, cancer, death. I don't want to put any child into that system. So there's a whole lot of points there I guess I've bombarded you with, but...
No, I'm writing it down.
Right, that's good. Okay. Yeah, all right, I'll hear what you have to say, and then we'll just kind of go from there, I guess.
Okay, well, we can address each point.
Sure.
So, preventing suffering. Okay, so the thing is that the least people there are on this earth, the more wild animals there will be, because obviously we take up a certain amount of space, and therefore there's less wild animals.
I don't think that's necessarily true. Obviously, historically, the amount of land humans use is a function of both our population and also how much land each individual uses, which generally sort of aligns with how wealthy they are. And obviously our population and wealth have increased over time. So the amount of land we use has increased over time. But it's not necessarily the case that if population declines or there are less humans, that we would be using less land. As humans, we can choose how we use land. And so if we want to use more land for whatever reason, like, we can, for, whatever activity we want to, putting, I don't know, generating green energy or however you want to do it. So I don't think it's necessarily true that reducing the number of people will reduce the amount of land humans use. There was another thing I was going to say, but I've forgotten. Yeah, I can't. Yeah. Oh, what was the other thing I was going to say? I can't remember. But anyway, let's continue. Maybe it will come back to me.
But if we were to decrease, then there'd be more wild animals, and wild animals, there's a lot more suffering in the animal kingdom.
Yeah, another. This isn't what I was going to say. If it pops into my head, I'll say it. But another thing that I was going to say was that. Oh, that's fucking gone from my head as well now. What is going on? Clearly, I haven't taken my B12 tablet today. Oh, it's completely escaped me. Okay, cool. Well, I'll go back to something else. So, yeah, so I have like I have a big concern for the suffering of wild animals as well, as Emily seems to do. So yeah, this is like a big moral issue that I also care about. Whether like I am willing to essentially like sacrifice a child on the altar of wild animal suffering to sort of displace wild animal lives or activity is another thing. Like I personally wouldn't be willing to do that. Just like I wouldn't be willing to sacrifice other animals to do that. Like if I was not vegan, I would use many more resources than I do as a vegan, but I'm not willing to pay for animals to be exploited and killed to then use up more land and displace wild animal suffering. Like I care about wild animal suffering, but I'm not going to stop being vegan, and I'm not going to procreate to help alleviate that issue. Like sometimes we care about multiple issues, and sometimes those things pull in different directions, which I think antinatalism and wild animal suffering do to a certain extent. And like as an individual, I'm just gonna try and navigate that the best I can. And the way that I'm doing that at the moment is I'm not going to procreate. I'm going to advocate for others not to procreate because it's something I see as like egregiously harmful and like a serious moral issue that people have direct control over of their own actions. But I'm also going to encourage people to help alleviate wild animal suffering as well. So like I personally donate a significant amount of my income to charities. One of those charities is a charity that helps wild animals. If anyone wants to know the specific one, it's Wild Animal Initiative, which I think are a great organization worthy of supporting. Another thing I was going to say was, going back to the thing I forgot before, is if Emily or anyone else wants to use up more land to displace wild animals so that there's less wild animal suffering, it doesn't seem like intuitive to me to go straight to, well, I'm going to create someone else so that they can do that, right? Because Emily has control over how many resources she uses. She doesn't necessarily have control over how many resources her child uses. So if Emily is obviously going to use resources to raise her child, if she wanted to displace the suffering of wild animals or help wild animals, surely that money, she could spend it in a much wiser way than just creating someone so that they can generally use resources. Maybe you're going to create someone who actually doesn't use that many resources. Maybe they're going to be very eco-conscious, which is probably more than likely if she's raising them vegan, right? So she could just massively increase her own personal consumption if she wants to displace wild animal suffering in that way, as can anyone else. You know, she could, start like just buying like loads more resource intensive materials. I don't know what those would be, but I'm sure she could do the research and do that, right? So yeah, it's not clear to me that if you wanted to use more land, that having a child would be the best way to do that. And we've got a against evil. And we have a super chat that's just come up. Let me just quickly read that out, and then I'll come back to it. I'll really try and remember my point that I was going to make. So Tailgate Activism has made a super chat. Thank you so much for the support is the first thing to say. And they say, if someone is so poor and lives in a restrictive country, then shouldn't that person move to another country to adopt if having a child is so dire? So if someone is poor and lives in a restrictive country, then shouldn't that person move to another country to adopt if having a child is so dire? So I think what you're saying is, if someone lives in like an awful situation, they want to move to somewhere else, or they want to change their circumstances so they're in a better circumstance before adopting someone. That doesn't necessarily have to be like from one country to another, right? You could be in a very like rich country but be in a really shit situation. You could be in a quite a poor country but be in quite a good situation, because obviously there's inequality in every country. So but yeah, in terms of the general point of, should someone be in the best circumstances they can be in, they can try to be in before they adopt, of course. So for example, if I was going to adopt, I'm like in my sort of mid to late 20s. I've actually just recently moved into my sort of later 20s, which I guess is a bit depressing. But yeah, so I obviously don't have the resources at my command that I hopefully will have in like my late 30s, 40s. So maybe I would put off adopting until then, when I expect to be, have more resources, be more like secure in myself and my surroundings, be in a long-term relationship, hopefully, this sort of stuff. So yeah, of course, you want to wait until you're in better circumstances to adopt. or if someone's going to have a biological child. Obviously, I think they shouldn't, but if they are going to, they should wait until they're in better circumstances. But thank you so much, Tailgate Activism, for the donation and the question/comment. So the other thing I was going to say about, the wild animal stuff, and again, on top of all of this, like, I do care about wild animals, like, and I put like significant resources towards helping them by donating to charity, right? So the other thing I was going to say is that this isn't always the case, but it kind of smacks me of like often someone coming up, like using this argument to justify their personal desire rather than they're actually having a child because they've been convinced of this argument. Because if someone thought that procreation were the best means of, or a good means of reducing wild animal suffering, then it actually wouldn't be the most effective way to go about it than of having a kid themselves. So if let's say Emily has a kid herself, which she is going to do. I don't know about Australian currency, but like in the UK, I think the average amount of money it takes to raise a child is somewhere around £200,000. So I don't know what that is in Australian dollars. It seems like a reasonable assumption to me that you would be able to encourage others to procreate more than just once with £200,000. Even if on a very basic level, you were going to say to two couples, okay, let's say these two couples, you've had one child. I'm going to give you £100,000 to encourage you to have a second child. And let's say at that point in time, they weren't planning to have a second child. You will be able to find at least two couples that will take that deal, right? And then with that £200,000 that you were initially going to spend on your own child, you've now like helped produce two children, right? And that's just like a conservative estimate. You'd probably be able to encourage more people to have children with that amount of money and the time and resource, like other resources as well, that you would put into having your child. So it's not clear to me that if you wanted to reduce wild animal suffering and you thought procreation was the best or a good way, that you having a child yourself was the best way to go about it. So that's why it kind of seems to me that it's just kind of like often used as a get out clause rather than an actual like genuine argument. Because I don't think like personal procreation would be the best way. It'd probably be helping encourage others and outsourcing the work to them. Especially in Emily's case, because she would then be able to use her time rather than raising a child to go and do activism in other ways, right? And maybe outsource that sort of work of raising a child to people who maybe weren't doing activism, right? But they were willing to have children. Not that I'm advocating for people to do this, but what I'm saying is if you were convinced of this argument, it wouldn't necessarily lead you to personally procreate, which is why it kind of smacks me as like, is this a genuine argument or not? But let's continue.
Yeah, so I'm actually not fully convinced by this argument. I think these are made on kind of impossible calculations that it's kind of hard to quantify. Like if we were to actually if you were to research, for example, were there more animals in Britain at the time of the Celts than there are now? The data that you get on it is pretty up in the air. It's, if you ask ChatGPT or whatever, it would be like, we don't really know this. But in any case, the amount of suffering that humans cause to these wild animals is crazy anyway, because obviously we holocaust trillions of marine animals every year. Open air suffocation is the leading cause of death for those animals. We create, in human city spaces, we create giant factory farms. We're holocausting 70 billion land animals per year. And then there's all the domesticated animals that live with us as well, who are being tortured as well in these horrific incidences like snuff videos and stuff online. There's people microwaving cats and crushing puppies and all this horrific stuff that humans do. So I'm not even fully convinced really that there would be less animal suffering overall if humans are here, if that makes sense. I don't think we have any track record of saying that we have.
And Animal Rights Joe has just said, I don't think the argument is that natalism is the most effective way to reduce wild animal suffering. True, I did correct myself and say like someone might think it's the most or just a good way. And And then they continue, just a way that may or may not reduce suffering overall, and thus can't be called immoral on a negative utilitarian view. Yeah, I don't know if Emily is a negative utilitarian, or that's where she's coming from, or that's the sort of argument she was putting forward. So the perspective I come at it from, and maybe this is where George is coming from as well, but I don't want to speak for him, is that so there are these like philanthropic concerns, right, of like viewing coming into existence as a harm, and it's unethical in a philanthropic sense to create a child, create someone else. And then what often pronatalist vegans like Emily come forward and say is that, well, actually there are these sort of like external benefits, right, as in reducing wild animal suffering, that, you know, that I don't know if, well, it depends on the person, obviously, but maybe they just totally disregard the philanthropic concerns, or maybe they just think these, you know, extrinsic concerns are more important. And the pushback that I give, and the pushback I think George gives, is to say, well, you're putting these like external considerations forward, but we're trying to rebut them because we don't think those are strong enough considerations to override the philanthropic concerns, right? So it's not like we're just arguing the case of like these extrinsic concerns. We're saying that the core of it should be these philanthropic concerns, and the extrinsic concerns you're talking about seem too dubious to override these philanthropic concerns, which are like very serious. I mean, this is like if creating someone, if the sort of morally relevant harms, like in like the lifetime worth of suffering and ultimately death as well, if we were to like do an equivalently serious thing to an existing person, like this would be something equivalent, if and something as serious but not necessarily identical. This would be like a very grave amount of suffering and then death to put on someone. Well, they're already going to die, I guess, but like an equivalent amount of harm. That would be a very grave amount of harm to impose on someone for some sort of somewhat dubious, like vague appeal to wild animals, right? Like it's not entirely clear which way it would go with wild animals. George is also giving like more info about, like, you know, we've got like, I think they're called liminal animals as well. And then the domesticated animals that we've put in place of some wild animals, you know, they suffer like very intensely. So yeah, it's not clear that like those considerations would be worth imposing like a horrific amount of suffering and then death on an existing person. So why would we create someone who will then go through that over their lifetime, right? Yeah, like I think, yeah, often with antinatalists, we talk about like creating someone, but you could also use in the hypothetical like an equivalent amount of harm imposed on someone who already exists. And it would be interesting to see if pronatalist vegans would be willing to essentially, you know, in some cases torture someone for the, you know, their principle of reducing wild animal suffering. I'm not sure. You'd have to ask those specific people. I'm gonna play, but I'm just gonna quickly sort out my lighting situation.
We have decreased animal suffering as a result of us being here. I can't really see any evidence to provide for that. I would say actually we've probably increased it.
As bad as factory farms are, well, not so much factory farms, but slaughterhouses are, it is more humane than how a lot of animals get killed in the wild.
I think that's a pretty bold statement. I mean, like, I agree that like there are animals in the wild that die in brutal and horrific ways, and I would never want anyone to be subjected to that. But like, I mean, slaughterhouses are pretty like brutal. I don't know if Emily has been like in slaughterhouses or seen the footage, or if she stays away from that stuff, but like, yeah, getting killed in a slaughterhouse is by no means fun, and it's not clear to me at all that the deaths of wild animals on average are more brutal than in slaughterhouses. You've also got to remember that like obviously wild animals, their actual lives as well are not always good. Like often their lives as well as their deaths are not great. But the vast majority of animals that are domesticated are basically tortured like throughout their life consistently. So yeah, we've got to remember that.
No, I would disagree. I think that what happens to animals in... Say again, sorry?
It depends on the animal, but certain like lions will sit there eating a zebra while the zebra is still alive.
Yeah, so any single thing that you see happen in nature, that and worse happens in a slaughterhouse. There seems to be this weird idea, pushed largely by carnists, and I've seen by natalist vegans, unfortunately, as well, that the wild is somehow worse than what happens in animal agriculture, and it's not. If you think of the most brutal death you've ever seen in nature, humans just do that every single day to animals. Humans do literally rip animals apart, cut them apart with knives while they're still alive. There's even restaurants where you can live eat animals. There's slaughterhouses. Pigs and chickens are boiled alive by the thousands every day. Even just in the UK, pigs and chickens in huge numbers are boiled alive because they're stunned ineffectively, have their throats cut, and then they're just dipped into the scalding tank, while often they're still fully conscious. So we're boiling animals alive. We're putting animals in microwaves. We're cutting them apart while they're still alive. We're gutting them while they're still alive. We're suffocating them on the decks of ships. I can't really see any evidence at all that what's happening in nature is somehow worse than what's happening in human societies and in slaughterhouses to animals. In fact, I would actually say it's worse in human societies because we hold those animals captive and torture them mentally, put them in cages before we boil them alive or cut them apart alive.
Yeah, well, that's why obviously I'm vegan, and I will be raising my child vegan. And I know.
Well, let's see what she's going to say, because raising a child vegan is easier said than done.
I know you said, I guess this is going into the vegan, the next point. Well, for me personally, I'll be like first of all, if you have children and then you go vegan and then you change their diet, it's less likely to work because they have because they're used to animal products, and then you kind of change it up. So
I don't know like what the actual sort of proportion of children raised by vegans is that stay vegan throughout their life, let alone how many that become an activist. But let's say it's like 90%, which again, I don't know, but that hits me as being a generous proportion, because I have spoken to quite a few vegans who have had children since being vegan, so have raised their children vegan, and it's not 90% that of their children that have stayed vegan. But let's be generous and say, that like 90% of children born to vegans will remain vegan their whole life. Like that's a 1 in 10 chance that your child will be responsible for the deaths of thousands of animals, because a non-vegan will be responsible for conservatively like at least like 1,500 to 2,000 animals over their life. And it seems wild to me that vegans would advocate for doing something where there's a 10% chance that your child will essentially become like a serial killer, but on a scale that is not usually seen, right? But it's obviously animals are the victims rather than humans. That just seems like a wild risk to take when you could just not procreate and spend your time, if you're concerned about wild animals, fighting for wild animals. If you're concerned about domesticated animals, fighting for domesticated animals, or doing both, right? Like no one's forcing you to have the child, like assuming no one is, obviously, assuming that you are making this choice of your own, like, decision. God, that was like Donald Trump then. So like it's completely up to you how you spend your time and energy outside of work, because I'm assuming everyone will need to like pay the bills. why would you take that risk of 1 in 10, you know, which I think is probably a generous figure, for thousands of animals to die, when you could simply spend your time in a productive way where you have full control over what you're doing? You don't have full control over your child, right? You can raise them how you like, but ultimately at the end of the day, like once they become old enough, they're going to choose what they do. Whereas you could have just not created the child and spend your time, you have complete control over what you do, doing activism or other productive things if you want to help animals. So yeah, I can't remember if I was going to say anything else, but we'll continue.
It can kind of be a bit like, oh, this is a new change. But if you raise the child from birth, they're more likely to continue because that is their norm, right? And I probably will stay away from the mock meats because as much as I can, because I just don't feel like a child who's never had meat needs to have mock meat, because it's like, why would they crave something they've never had? And and that way, like,
well, I mean, she says, why would you crave something you've never had? But people, well, not necessarily crave, but people are curious about things they've never had. Like before, I mean, any new food, when you go to a new country, you're curious about the food there, or people are curious about trying new drugs, or people are curious about all sorts of things that they haven't done before. It doesn't necessarily mean they'll crave animal products, but they might be curious, especially given that like most of the people around them are going to be having them. Like every major food company is trying to get them to eat it. So yeah, it doesn't have to be craving, but they could be curious, and then once they start eating them, it's normalized to them, so they'll maybe continue eating them. Who knows? They may go back to being vegan. Who knows? But it's like there's so much uncertain. That's the thing. So much uncertainty.
They pretty much won't really know the taste of meat. But yeah, like I think that some vegans might just raise them, you know, like on the diet, but not really explain to them about why we're vegan. And I think that I plan to take my children once they get old enough. I plan to take my children to not slaughterhouses. I'm gonna do that not until they're much older. To sanctuaries, and explain, and like I'm gonna buy some books. I haven't bought any books yet because she's too little. I'm gonna have like some books, some vegan children's books, which I plan to discover in the next couple of years. I've got a while before she can kind of read books, or like listen to books and stuff. So yeah, and then she can, like, I'll be reading them and like really teaching them like the point of veganism. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to like teach our children the real point of veganism, not just the diet, but I'll also be teaching her how to cook, which I know a lot of, like, in the Western culture, they don't teach their kids how to cook. They pretty much treat their kids like...
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, all of this is good, teach your kids skills.
Like, as if they're incompetent for, like, the whole time. And then they wonder when they magically turn 18, why they just aren't doing everything for themselves. So I'll definitely be teaching my children from a young age how to cook, and so that way, by the time they get to being a teenager, they know how to prepare their own food. And that will like, having those cooking skills and knowing how to cook vegan food will set them up for a better time than if you just constantly are cooking for them, and then one day they have to cook for themselves and they think, oh, it's just easier to buy, it's easier to buy certain things, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that is an interesting thing we can go into just now, actually, the whole likelihood of the child staying vegan and blah, blah, blah. There's one thing, though, that I want to kind of pick up on quickly, just before we go into that, about the wild animal suffering point that I forgot to mention, and then we'll go into that. But would you acknowledge that there's actually no non-selfish reason to procreate? Because this whole wild animal suffering thing, this is something that I only think kind of came into vegan spaces recently with regards to natalism. I think it's this thing that Dr. Avi actually kind of brought in. And I think natalists are kind of using it to shoehorn this fake altruistic purpose to procreate. I don't believe that anyone has ever sat down and said, it's selfish, you know, generally to have a kid, to put them into work and for all this stuff to happen, and they might not be vegan. However, we must prevent wild animal suffering. Like, would you acknowledge that no one is doing that?
Like, you're talking about ending suffering, and it's like, but you won't end wild animal suffering. You're not going to end all of suffering, and you're not going to reduce it. That's what my point is. It's like,
I don't think George was saying, I mean, maybe he was saying this and he'll correct me, but like, I don't think George was saying that, like, antinatalism is going to end suffering, because obviously it isn't. It's about like not imposing suffering on someone through creating them, right? Or not imposing harm on someone through creating them. It's like, I don't know, if you're against murder, you know, I'm not against murder because I think it's going to end suffering. I'm against murder because I think murder is imposing a harm on someone, right? The harm of being killed without your consent, and being created. You're being created without your consent. And there's harm being imposed on you there, including death. It's not about ending suffering. Yeah, that's too sort of grandiose. It's more of a specific position, right?
Well, I don't think you're going to reduce suffering. And I don't think that, like, I mean, okay, we'll get back onto...
George in the chat says, baby, let's put on some Marvin Gaye, light some candles, and prevent some wild animal suffering.
that topic. But I know that you said you don't believe in bringing, like, joy and stuff, but I do. And I'm like, I don't know, like, it gets down to the point of what's the meaning of life, I guess. And I know that some people say, oh, the meaning of life is to have kids. And I'm like, no, I don't believe that. But, like, I do believe that, I don't know, I just, I think you're, like, also as well, like, well, if we're looking at the practicality of, like, you know, trying to convince people.
But why would so for me, the meaning of life is like, there is no ultimate meaning. But we are meaning seeking individuals. So, you know, we try to formulate some sense of meaning in the environment that we're in the world we're in. So it's about us creating meaning for ourselves ultimately. That's just how I think the way the world is. But yeah, it's just strange to me that, like, the meaning of her life, which is how it kind of came across, but maybe it isn't like this, is about just like, like creating as much joy in the universe as possible, just like out of nothing, just, you know, almost like having a bank account and just trying to have as much money as there as possible. Even if the money isn't serving any purpose to like anyone who exists, you're just like getting more money. And it's like, why would you be creating new individuals just so that there's like more joy in the universe? It's like, oh, so then people only exist so that they can serve the purpose of creating well-being in the universe, rather than well-being serving the purpose of attending to people's like needs and desires who are here already. It just seems very strange to me. Like, sure, increasing the amount of joy in the universe is a good thing as far as it serves individuals who like need that joy or will benefit from it. But creating new people simply to like bump up the numbers just seems like a completely flimsy foundation to any like grand meaning in life or purpose in life. It reminds me of the analogy of, like, say you want to increase the amount of like headgear that's used by people who drive motorbikes, right? Obviously it's good to increase the number of people who use the headgear, right, when they're driving a motorbike, but only in that like people who already ride motorbikes adopt the headgear, right? Because then it actually serves a purpose, because there's someone who has a need and a desire for what the headgear provides them. But if you're just recruiting more people to ride motorbikes so that you can then get them to wear headgear so you can bump up your numbers, like cooking the books, that just seems like so pointless to me. And like, what ultimate purpose is that serving? Like, what good is this doing? And it's the same as like creating people simply so that they can then have this electrical activity in their mind that we refer to as well-being, right? It's like why? What purpose is that serving? I don't get it personally. Whereas I do get it if there's someone who is already there and they have this inbuilt desire and need for this like thing we call well-being. I 100% get that, because there's already a deprivation there that needs to be attended to, an interest, a desire that needs to be attended to.
People not to have kids. I think what will happen is, like, this is just on a practical level, because like we were speaking hypothetically, but on a practical level, I think that the more caring people like us who do actually think about certain things and probably would make better parents because we are caring, we would be the ones suffering not being able to have kids. Like, I know that you think, oh, you know, we're reducing suffering, but like, if someone doesn't have, like, for me, I would suffer. Like, that would be some extra suffering on me if I couldn't have children.
Sure, but are you, like, is it okay for you to alleviate your suffering through imposing suffering on someone else, right? It's not clear to me that it is. Like, what if someone is like extremely sexually fucking, what's the term? Not agitated. Not aggravated. Frustrated. That's it. What if someone is extremely sexually frustrated and like this causes them, like a lot of like torment, you know, in their day-to-day life. Like they're constantly going around like, oh my God, you know. Does that mean that they can then just like force themselves on someone, like impose suffering on someone else to satisfy their own like frustration? Personally, I don't think so. So yeah, and it seems like the same kind of logic.
I know, because when I was like, before I got pregnant and I was trying to find someone else, very difficult. If I'd hear about someone getting pregnant or have someone having another baby, I would just cry, and like I was like crying a lot and crying myself to sleep.
And look, I 100% empathize with her. Like, it is a shit situation to be in. Because like wanting to procreate and have a child is, if it's like, it's this deep down desire that people often have, and if you can't like, if that's not something that like is happening for you, you're constantly being like presented with people who have kids, like the kids in buggies and stuff. I can 100% get how that is like extremely frustrating and like really hard on you. It's just like alleviating your own problems with an unethical solution. It just doesn't seem justified to me.
And worried that I would be able to miss out on like having kids, and I was very depressed.
Well, yeah, but you know what I'm going to say to this though, don't you? Or maybe you don't. I don't know.
Just finish my point.
Yeah, go on.
So you're going to create something, and then I think that the caring people, they're just going to have kids and they're not going to care. You know, so from a practical level, I can see people still having children, and then a small majority suffering because they're stopping themselves from having children when they really want to. And yeah, we're still going to see this rise in, like, we're still going to have people come into the world.
I think what she's saying here is basically just like, my decision is a drop in the ocean, because if I don't procreate, everyone else is going to continue procreating, which is very similar to logic I'm sure she's heard from non-vegans, where they say, well, if I stop eating meat, you know, it's not going to change anything. It's a drop in the ocean. Everyone else is going to continue eating meat. Animals are going to continue dying. And I'm just such a small part of it, so I might as well do it.
Yeah, it's inevitable that people will still come into the world. My point about as an antinatalist, well, I'm sorry that you've suffered and stuff, and you were talking about crying yourself to sleep at night and all this kind of stuff. Well, obviously my point is it was wrong to create you. I don't think that your life has been a net good, as I don't think mine has. I don't think that it was ethical that our parents made us. I think the fact that you've suffered so much in your life, I think it was a moral crime to bring you into existence is the point, I guess.
I was suffering and I was sad, but like overall, that's like I have a lot of great things going on in my life, you know?
Yeah, but these were things that you never had any interest in liking before you were born. So all that happened to me and you was, yeah, there are many things we both do enjoy in our life, for sure. Mm-hmm. And while we are in existence, we're ultimately trying to avoid suffering every single day, right? We're pleasure-seeking animals. We're constantly trying to avoid suffering and harm, which is why life is so shit. It is. This is the system that we're forced into. It's like
one of the videos I'm making at the moment is about I guess like the pessimistic evaluation of life, how it's much worse than many people give it credit for.
We're not forced into anything. This is just.
How are we not forced into it? You didn't consent to being born.
Yeah, but like I could opt out, but I don't want to. I don't want to.
So she's obviously, when she says opt out, she obviously means like end her life. I don't think the fact that people don't. I mean, first of all, a lot of people do end their own lives. It's, I believe, the 7th leading cause of death in the world. Let me actually get up the Our World in Data page, causes of death, because I actually cite it fairly regularly, saying it's the 7th leading, but I haven't actually checked in a while. I just want to double check again. Here, causes of death. What do people die from? Okay, so I'm not finding the chart that I usually use. Where is it? That's frustrating. Okay, cool. I'm not going to be able to get it up because it's like in the middle of a stream. But yeah. But it's a lot of people every year. Yeah, like end their own lives. And yeah, so a lot of people do, but the fact that like other people don't end their own lives is not like an argument against antinatalism, in my view. That doesn't mean that it, like, given that someone isn't ending their own lives once they're here, that therefore like there's a reason or there's permission to start their life. There's a whole load of things I could go into. I've got a couple of videos on this on my channel. But fundamentally what I would say is like, yeah, obviously now she exists. She has like all of these interests and desires. And obviously we also suffer from certain evolutionary biases. So like we've been evolving for billions of years. Obviously evolution has instilled in us certain biases to want to continue existing, even if we're in like really shit circumstances, like a concentration camp or a war zone or something like this, or we're being tortured. Because evolution, like the fundamental reason we are here is because like our genes want to replicate, and it was advantageous in the situations we were in to evolve in the way that we have evolved to what we are now. Right. So obviously we're going to have evolved a bias to continue existing, even in the face of great pain, because that's going to be advantageous to our genes. Just because we suffer from that bias, it isn't clear to me that we should create new people to suffer from that bias, right? Especially new people who, some of them may be in insanely shit situations, and the only reason they're persisting is because of the irrational bias that has been instilled in us from evolution. That seems like a really unfair situation to put someone into. Obviously also there's the fear of death as well, right? Like ending your own life is not an easy thing to do, psychologically and sometimes like physically as well. So yeah, to point to the fact that you haven't personally ended your own life, or people aren't doing it en masse, although there are a lot of people doing it, I don't think that's really like a sensible point to make against antinatalism.
End my life.
Well,
I love my life.
Yeah, but it's a horrific situation to have been put into, isn't it? The idea that our parents just said to us, right, we're going to force you into this thing called life, and well, it sucks, but there is this option called suicide. You know, if there's like, what kind of a shit position is that to put our children in, our own flesh and blood? Like, this is why for me parenting is essentially just a moral crime.
But I don't want to end my life, so I'm saying I don't want to end my life, and a lot of people don't want to end their life.
Yeah, and even the fact that like a lot of people don't want to end their life, like you have no particular reason to think that your child won't be susceptible to being in the group that ends up wanting to end their life, right? Like it's not an insignificant number of people, right? Like I'm sure everyone, I know this is anecdotal, but I'm sure everyone watching this stream knows someone or knows of someone who has ended their life, right? Maybe multiple people. I do. I think I know multiple people. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know at least one. I might know some others that are escaping me now. But anyway, it's like, yeah, a lot of people do end their lives. So it's not like it wouldn't be completely wild and unexpected if the child Emily created or the child any of us created is in the group of people who does end up like ending their own lives. I'm just going to sort out my lighting situation again.
Yeah.
They love life and they want to continue it.
But that doesn't mean that it was fair that it was assigned on you in the first place. It was forced upon you in the first place. Obviously, you have interest in living now that you're still alive. Now that you're alive, we have just through sheer machine-like evolutionary purposes this irrational interest, this preference to want to continue existing, despite all the horrific things that can and will actually happen to us. The slow and painful death that awaits us, the horrific murder or rape that could happen to us, or the plane that's going to go down over the ocean that we're on, and the losses that we're going to experience. I see no need to have ever had these things forced on us in the first place when we could just blissfully not exist.
Yeah, see, I have a problem with that because it's like, what's the point of anything then?
Well, but then we get into the whole carnist logic of like, we should breed like the happy cows and they get a chance to exist.
I mean, they can breed on their own and live in like the wild or whatever. But yeah, like obviously you're bringing them into the world to then like be treated like shit and then die. Whereas like with us, it's not like that.
Well, not if they're on like a happy farm, which obviously, like in reality, are extremely, extremely rare. In terms of the number of animals on them. Not that even it would make it okay, even if an animal was on that farm, but yeah, just like she's appealing to them, so they are extremely rare.
Well, the carnist argument is that we could breed these cows to not be treated like shit. We could give them great, positive, happy lives. I would still say that the one rape that the female cow experiences or the one slaughter means it was unethical to bring them into existence. And when we create as humans, we're essentially committing an act of premeditated murder. We're essentially committing an act of premeditated. We know all these horrific things can happen to our child, right? We know that if we have a child, that they probably will be sexually assaulted if they're a girl. They probably will be violently assaulted at some point if they're a boy. They will get cancer or heart disease or whatever it is. They will experience.
No, you mean they might?
No, they will. They will die. They will.
No, I didn't say they will die. You said if a girl, they will be sexually assaulted. That's not true.
They probably will be.
I mean, there's high possibility.
Yeah, too high. Too.
Yeah, like why would you bring someone into a world where there's a high possibility that they'll be sexually assaulted? And that's just sexual assault. Like there are all the other things that can happen in life. You know, like an insanely high number of people get cancer.
But it's too high to even bother with the risk. I just don't.
I still think that it's worth, like, as a woman myself, I still think it's worth being alive and being able.
But like, why should your judgment of your life mean that you can impose the risk of being sexually assaulted on another woman? I don't understand that. Like as I at least in the UK, my understanding is that men are actually at more risk of assault than women in every way apart from sexual. So if I as a man am okay living my life with the higher than of women risk that I will be physically assaulted, like violently attacked, just because I'm okay with those odds now I exist, why does that mean that if I knew I was going to create a boy, why is that okay for me to then say, well, I'm going to, I'm happy for them to have the risk on them? That seems very strange to me.
Experience like joy. I know you said you don't believe in that, but it's like that's the point of life. We experience joy and we experience happiness, but we're gonna take all the good with the bad, and there's no inherent way to get permission, as you would call it, in order to to bring a child into the world.
Yeah, so then don't do it.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. But then they miss out on all the good things.
But why would they care? Because
there's no one who exists to miss out on the good things. They don't exist to be deprived.
They don't exist.
I think it comes down to
all right. All right.
It comes down to a biological urge.
Right, that's what it is.
Yeah, for most people it does come down to a biological urge, but a biological urge isn't an ethical justification.
Okay, but Emily, right? Are you sad that there is no joy on Mars, or do you just think?
I don't know if there's no joy on Mars.
We assume that there's no. All right, just point to a planet in the solar system that you know for sure there's no life. The sun. Okay, are you are you sad that there's no joy in the sun?
No.
Then what's the issue? Why are they missing out on you? Because you said a moment ago they're missing out on joy by not being born.
Well, they get to experience joy and all the good things because they're born.
Yes, but what I'm saying is it doesn't matter that they're not born, because, and you even believe this yourself. I don't think you even believe that it's a sad thing that a non-existent entity doesn't exist. Because you even said yourself, you're not sad that there's no life in the sun experiencing joy. You just see the sun, and who cares that there's no one in the sun experiencing joy?
If someone doesn't want to have children, then I'm fine with accepting that they're not going to bring children into the world. So I'm fine if they don't want to bring children. I'm fine if they don't want to bring children. But for those who do want to have children, I don't think it's a bad thing, because it's just one of those things. You take the good with the bad.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to argue is the good is not.
Taking the good with the bad is all well and it's an all well and good mindset to have once you're here, but to use that as a reason to impose suffering on someone else, if I was to go and attack some woman and she says, why are you doing that?
And we raise them to be warriors against evil.
Thank you so much for the donation. I will very quickly get to it now. I'm just going to finish what I was saying. If I was to attack some woman and she was to say, why are you doing that? I was to say, take the good with the bad. I attack her and then give her some chocolates, for example. Or I then organize a surprise party that's going to be amazing. So that she actually gets more pleasure from that than the negative of me attacking her. It's and then I'm to say, take the good with the bad. That's just such a cheap get out of holding yourself accountable for the ethics of your actions. Even if you're planning to give them a benefit afterwards, it's not okay to go around attacking people, right? Especially creating people when it's going to be more serious than attacking them, the harm they're going to suffer, and they're ultimately going to die as well. Very quickly, I'm going to get to this donation, and then I'm also going to put a poll in the chat as well, because I quite enjoy. You know what? It's so annoying. For some reason, I can't access live chats from my laptop for some reason. I don't know why. For some reason, it's not happening. So, and it's not letting me do it on my phone. So, looks like we can't do a poll. So, apologies for that. But the donation, first of all, thank you so much for the donation and the support. It really does help. So, this person has said, keep babies where they belong, in the black pit of non-existence. Which it's kind of I understand the sentiment, but obviously there aren't actually babies there. It's like Ricky Gervais said, there's no ghost fetuses clawing at some cabinet trying to get into existence. But I completely understand the the sentiment. I remember there's a quote somewhere of someone talking about leaving their kids in the blessed peace of non-existence or something like that, which I quite like the imagery of. Even though I don't think it's like actually accurate in reality, it's very nice imagery. But thank you again so much for the donation. Cool, let's continue.
Sufficient enough to justify the bad. We don't get upset. Okay, we don't get. Okay, but we don't get upset that there's no joy being experienced in the sun. But if there, let's say we could just randomly create particles in the sun now for a split.
I've just increased the playback speed because I've realized we're only half an hour in, so we've still got an hour and a half to go. Yeah, so I might end it at the point that they finish the debate and go on to the Q&A. We'll see how we're feeling.
A second that would feel being burned by the sun. That would be sad, right? You would surely want to stop that.
From someone from dying up in the sun?
Yeah, like let's say, all right, let me phrase this in a different way. What would you think would be a more morally urgent issue? To quickly create an air particle inside the sun that would experience an orgasm, or to quickly create an air particle, or sorry, to prevent an air particle from coming into existence in the sun that would be fried alive? What would be more morally urgent, the orgasm or stopping someone from being fried alive in the sun?
Well, obviously the ending, like the not suffering, would be more urgent.
Right. I guess this is the point I'm trying to make. There's no moral urgency to actually create well-being, to create pleasure.
So Louis has just suggested in the chat that we do like a sort of pseudo poll. So I ask a question, then people can put like 1s and 2s or whatever in the chat. So yeah, we can do that. I don't think it'll be as good, but we can see how it goes, especially because then everyone knows how each other voted rather than it being anonymous. But I actually just wanted to ask, sorry if you can hear that, there's an ice cream van outside. So yeah, I don't know how many people have come in the chat that aren't usually here. But what I was going to ask is just a very basic question of like how many people are on George's side, how many people are on Emily's side, or like you could phrase it as how many people are antinatalists and how many are not. Not necessarily they're against antinatalism, but they just aren't necessarily antinatalist. Maybe they're neutral or maybe they're a pro-natalist. So maybe people put in the chat like either put George or Emily or put antinatalist or not antinatalist. Yeah, so anyone who feels comfortable, please put in the chat. Sorry, I couldn't do the poll. I'll try and see if I can do it on my phone, but I don't think I can. No, it doesn't look like I can. Yeah, so yeah, if people want to, they can put it in there. Or actually, I could try from here. Let's see if I'm just going to see if I can try from inside Streamlabs. So... No, it's not letting me. That's so frustrating. I don't know why it's doing that. But anyway, let's... we've got, as expected, mostly antinatalists. Or all antinatalists so far, actually. Yeah, all antinatalists so far.
From nothing. There's only moral urgency to prevent suffering, to prevent someone from being fried alive or whatever it is. So yes, we take the bad with the good and blah, blah, blah in life. But what I'm saying is, I don't think there's a rational way to actually justify the good from a non-existent being coming into existence to experience good when what's more important is stopping the bad. I think it's more important that you weren't depressed, that you never cried, that you were never assaulted, that you will never experience cancer. I think that's more important to you than you did get married or you did have a great sex session with your boyfriend.
Oh, so Floris is the first sort of semi-pro-natalist. They say rare pro-natalist. If you're comfortable, Floris, what do you mean by that? Like, I'm assuming what you mean is like there are sort of, you're anti-natalist generally, but there are sort of like exceptions. What sort of exceptions do you consider ethical?
Friend, or you did.
If you're comfortable, obviously, I know when I first put the poll forward, I didn't say people are going to have to express more, but It's only if you want to.
Enjoy that video game, or you did enjoy that beautiful meal, or whatever it is. Like,
I feel like you're comparing like the worst things in life to some okay things in life. Like I think that people experience like joy in you know, like you know, not just having a meal, but also just like, you know, having the joy of like meeting someone new for the first time that you really like, or you know, achieving that goal that you had, or getting promoted.
But even those don't seem to be worth the worst things. Like, what's like, I don't know, like what's like the generally considered like the best thing people experience in life? Like love, right? Probably. Whereas even like love itself is kind of tainted. I don't know if people have heard of, I think it's a Buddhist metaphor of like honey on a razor blade. So it's like the nature of attachment, right? So love is a good example of like, love is one of the most like intoxicating in a positive way things in existence, but it can also be like one of the most brutal, like lead to the most brutal things in existence as well, right? And so the metaphor is like attachment or love is like licking honey off a razor blade, in that like you love the taste of the honey, but at the same time that attachment is going to cause you in certain circumstances to cut yourself on the blade or great pain. But yeah, getting back to it, so like even if we take like what people consider the best things in life, like loving someone, like if you're going to create someone and you're weighing up the worst things in life and the best things, and you're saying like the worst things in life, I don't know, they're in a concentration camp, or like they have like brutal cancer, or you know, they have cluster headaches, all this sort of stuff, but they're also like going to love someone at some point in their life. Now, if I were in that situation, I could make that evaluation for myself, and maybe I would say, yeah, the love is worth it. Who knows what I would say? But because those stakes are so high, it seems completely unreasonable for one person to make the decision on behalf of someone else. So I'm not saying that you can't make a reasonable assessment of those conditions in the positive. It's fine to do that for yourself. What I'm saying is, it's completely unreasonable and unethical for someone else to make, with those odds, to make that decision on behalf of someone else, when the alternative is simply you don't have to make a decision, they won't exist, and no one's harmed there. So it's like you run this massive risk, or you just don't do anything, and no one's going to be like worse off from that in terms of the person you're creating, because they won't exist. Hopefully that makes sense.
At work, and you've got just like the joy of like making new friends, and obviously like bringing a child into the world, and like having you know, and all the great things that come with like those little things that come with like life.
But there's no urgency. There's no need to create any of that. We can just live out
there
our
is
own.
a need, because I mean.
But you said there wasn't. You said you even said that you don't care that there's no one in the sun experiencing joy. So if you don't care about that, that's surely not a need.
Well, I think it's hard to get out, but I still feel like there is still like, because again, we have this biological urge, and people are still going to, realistically, procreate, and I think that our lives would be better, you know, when we can have kids, and then they're gonna have some suffering just like you are, but that's just like the point of life. And you're saying like, oh, there's no moral urgency. I'm like, yeah, well, there's no urgency to have kids, but if you want to have kids, then I think you should. And it's not urgent that you have, and I'm not going to force it on other people that they have to have children. But if you would like to have children and experience that, then I don't see it being a bad thing.
But this is how I think veganism in many ways intersects with, I hate the word intersex.
No, yeah, I was like, oh God, I didn't say that.
But I think it intersects with antinatalism in many ways, because I think the arguments you use there kind of sound similar to the kind of carnist arguments. It's like, oh yeah, we don't need to eat meat, but if I want to, I want to, and I like enjoy the taste of the meat. And it's like, yeah, okay, but what about the beings you're causing suffering to? And that applies.
I don't believe I'm causing suffering to my child.
But
well, yeah, if you like, if you have a complete free decision of whether to create a child or not, and you know that if you create a child, they will undergo some level of harm. It could be a normal amount of harm, or like the average amount of harm, or it could be like an extreme amount of harm, and they'll ultimately die as well. And you decide to do that, then obviously you're ultimately responsible because you put them in that situation in the first place. Like imagine just like walking into like a childhood cancer ward, and like there's the child in great pain, you know, because the cancer's gotten into their brain or something, and their parents are stood there just thinking, I wonder how this situation arose. Like, I wonder who, you know, is like ultimately responsible for this. Especially if the parents were made aware that the child could very likely get cancer, right? Imagine they had a screening or something. Obviously the parents are like morally accountable for that, or morally responsible for that, sorry. And even if someone is like, even if you bring someone into existence and someone else causes them harm, like let's say I have a kid and then someone bullies them at school, right? You can have like shared accountability or shared responsibility. Like the child who bullied my child, well, let's say they're not a child actually, because it's hard to say children are morally responsible for things because they're not really like all there. Let's say they're bullied as an adult, right? That other person who bullied my adult child is obviously responsible for their actions, but I'm also responsible in part for the harm imposed on my child because I put them in the initial set of conditions that I knew could lead to that, right? It's just like if I order a hitman to kill someone, the hitman is responsible for killing the person, but I am also responsible having hired the hitman. So there's shared even though there's just one victim that's been harmed, there's shared responsibility for the harm that's been done. And it's the same in procreation, in my view. Is like if there are other moral agents imposing harm on your offspring, they are responsible for that, but you are also like sharing some of the responsibility because you put your child in that state of vulnerability in the first place.
But you are, because it's you're the reason that they're coming into existence to suffer.
It's like if you send your child into a bad neighborhood, like when you don't need to, knowing that there are people who could mug them there. Obviously, the people who mug them are responsible, but you are also partly responsible as the parent for knowingly sending them in there.
Any single ultimately, by the way, I'm not dissing my parents at all. I love my parents very dearly, but any single thing that I've experienced in my life, that the harsh reality is, it's ultimately my parents' fault for creating me in the first place. It's of course the fault of whoever's doing the bad thing to me at the time. You know, if someone punches me in the face, it's the assaulter's fault. But it's still ultimately down to my parents that they created a being who got punched in the face when they could have just not done that. So a parent is still responsible for all the things that happen in their child's life. Every little thing, every single thing that happens in a child's life is the fault of the parents originally.
I think that she's a little bit upset with what you're saying because she's kicking me heaps. Kicking me everywhere. Yeah, I understand that, like, you're the like, well, most of the time, because I know you're pro sentience. So you don't believe in abortion after 8 weeks, I think it is. Right?
Yeah, I don't actually know the cutoff point at all. It's something, thankfully, I'll never have to think about. Both me and my wife are sterilized. So
I don't have to worry about that either.
Yeah. So that's all. But yeah, I take, before sentience, I guess I'll take a pro-death stance. I think it would be actually good before a fetus has sentience. I think we probably should abort them. But then once they have sentience, I can't see any argument as to how that's different to killing a 2-year-old child. There has to be a cutoff point, because once someone is sentient, that means they're now a rights bearer. They have some form of interest in staying alive, whereas before that sentience, there's no interest there. But yeah, go on.
I know, like, pro-life is like with the whole, like, I listen to the pro-life arguments and I'm like, yeah, that's really good. But then I also see points with it being against IVF and stuff. I mean, I guess you're against IVF too, but for completely different reasons. But they're like, oh no, they discard the embryos. I'm like, really?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know much about all these different methods. Again, it's not something that I've massively ever taken an interest in.
Yeah, so like clearly Emily, because before, like earlier, she was saying like, oh, well, they'll miss out on all the good things. Like clearly she doesn't actually like genuinely think that or care about that, because then she wouldn't be so flippant about those embryos being discarded, right? Then that's like, let's say it's like 7 or 8 embryos. I don't know if she said a specific number, but that's like 7 or 8 like potential future human beings that are missing out on all of the good things in life, you know? It's like, she didn't frame it like that, so obviously she doesn't really care about it in that way. Which I guess like she did also say in like she doesn't really care about the fact that there's no people like on Mars and stuff like that.
But yeah, I
didn't until I heard antinatalist stuff, and then I got into like pro-life stuff just to hear the pro-natalist opinions.
Did we want to talk about now the likelihood of the kids staying vegan, or did you want to carry on talking about the other thing?
I mean, staying vegan. I guess it's just like.
Well, okay. All right. Let me ask you a spicy question that will get the ball rolling on this. I guess my question to you as a vegan is why would you, Emily, think that it's okay to gamble with the lives of, I don't know, pigs, chickens, and cows by procreating when you could just not, and you could just ensure that not another single sheep, chicken, or cow would ever be harmed, essentially as a result of you?
So I guess that's just goes down to the fact that my pro-natalist reasons, like I believe in like that bringing children to the world isn't wrong, and I think that it helps society to bring people to assist in further economic development.
Okay, but what I'm more trying to get at here is the lives of those farmed animals that you'd be gambling with by having a child. See, one of the things that would always keep me up at night before I had a vasectomy, like I would literally wake up in cold sweats having nightmares about this, is I get someone pregnant, whatever, and then I've just basically created an endless...
That is the most antinatalist thing I've ever heard. That's so funny.
This chain of carnists, potentially, who will wage war on the animals. Whereas I could just end my lineage now and that just not happen. And if I ever did want a kid one day, which I don't want, by the way, I would just adopt, because at least then I've taken someone who's already in existence. And if I can't term them vegan, well, it's not my fault because it's their parents who had them. So it wasn't me. If I was to have a kid, I would do everything I could to raise them vegan if I procreated. But it's a massive reckless gamble. Like, there's just no way we can ensure. And unfortunately, we see evidence of this in the animal rights movement. We've seen notable animal rights activists have kids, raise them vegan, and then the kid go on to fund the animal holocaust. So it's like you undo your own veganism by having a kid.
So I guess it's not really antinatalism, I guess I'm just... so I think what happens is, because they're raised vegan doesn't mean they're raised in a vegan environment. And most parents, they send their children to home, to school, and school isn't vegan. No. So they have school friends who aren't vegan, and they are not taught the stuff about veganism. They felt like the odd one out. But see, for me, I'm planning to homeschool. So there is a homeschooling community, so they'll have friends and everything. They'll have other homeschooling friends that they'll hang out with and create friendships with. But
this all smacks of she's looking at the future with her and her child in an extremely idealized way. And sure, if you keep your child in a restricted environment where they're only going to be interacting with predominantly vegans, there's probably a higher chance that they will remain vegan. But she's reality is not that simple. A child will interact with if this is how we're just looking at it, right? Even if the child only interacts with vegans, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to be curious anyway or anything like this. They will be exposed to information outside of what Emily gives them and the vegans give them. Just like if someone's raised in an extremely religious society and only interacts with other religious people, sometimes they still is deconvert the right word? But become an atheist or even change religion. So sure, it would be less likely, but the point that George is making is that you're taking an extremely reckless gamble when you just don't need to do that. You could just, if you wanted to help animals, you could just spend your time elsewhere. Or a more general point, I know this doesn't apply to Emily, but more general point is you could adopt as well. But yeah, to say that because you're going to homeschool your child, she's not saying they're going to be bulletproof, but they're definitely not going to be non-vegan. It's extremely unlikely. I think that kind of she's idealizing the future that she's viewing of her having with her child. Everyone plans everything about how their child is going to be. They're going to do a martial art, they're going to learn a language, they're going to be great at sport, all this sort of stuff. And it doesn't work out like that. They end up buying their kid an iPad so they can sit on the sofa and play on the iPad, so that the parent can then get a night off, if you get what I mean. Reality is just way more complicated than how I think she's letting on. I think she's painting this picture in her head of how it's going to be with her child, because it's easy to do so when you're not in the circumstances where you've got the child yet.
They won't be in, a building with carnists. So I think the chances of them being indoctrinated by friends and the environment at schools, and they won't have that because they'll be home.
Yeah, I understand the importance of risk minimization, and that's great that you'll be raising your kid in a way to make them as least carnist as possible and ensure that they will. You're doing everything that you can possibly do, it sounds like, to ensure that they'll stay vegan. Unfortunately, the risk, though, remains, and I just don't see it as an ethical risk to take. These things just can and do happen. Vegans do raise their kids vegan in heavy animal rights environments, and the kid just says, "Mom, I want to eat what the other kids eat," and then, or they rebel. Things can happen as well, like they rebel against their parent. Oh, my overbearing mother, she forces me to eat vegan food, and I can't eat the Big Mac like the other kids. So, and I made friends the other week with these kids, and they were having cupcakes, and I really wanted one. I couldn't have one, and there's all these fucking pressures that are just surrounding our kids right from birth.
But that's even more reason why vegans would have kids, and then you can surround them with other vegan kids.
But those vegans should just adopt.
But most people aren't eligible to adopt, though.
Well, again, I don't. Then the alternative is that they just don't have kids. I mean, for me, this is just no issue. I mean, it's either you adopt or you just don't have a kid. If you don't get eligible for adoption, then you just say, well, I'm not eligible.
Yeah, and if you want to influence children to be more likely to be vegan, then you can go into an environment where there are children and influence them there. Like, there are loads of children who already exist. You can influence those children. Start a social media account aimed at children. Create resources that are pro-vegan for children, like writing children's books or making art or stuff like this. You can start a YouTube channel aimed at children that makes very accessible content based around veganism for children. Become a teacher. All these sorts of things. There are, if you want to influence children so they're more likely to be vegan, then you can do that. Like, you don't have to. I don't know why the mind would go straight to having a child yourself.
Because there's no, for me, morally,
unless you just want to have a child, then I understand why your mind goes there.
Justifiable reason to create someone just because we're not eligible for adoption or whatever it is. Ultimately, as an antinatalist, I believe that its own the decision to procreate is just purely selfish. There's no actual altruistic reason to do it, whereas adoption is the altruistic thing. The same as adopt, don't shop with animals. It's like buying a puppy from a breeder or adopting one.
Adoption is altruistic if there's a need for it, which if you live in the West, there is a lot of people who have fertility issues, and so the list is so long to get a child. I know several people in Australia who were on the list for 10 years and never got a child, and they paid out all that money and they couldn't get a child because there's just not that many children being put up for adoption as there is people trying to adopt. So it's one of those things where it's like, but there's no need there. Like, there's no need for people who can who don't have fertility issues to put their hand up. Like, it's not like, oh, we need more people to put their hand up. We don't. That's why you don't see adoption ads, because it's the opposite. There's more of a need for kids to be adopted than there is for people to adopt, because the adoption list is very long. They say that it's a minimum 7 years wait. And with Australia, the cutoff is somewhere in their 40s. So I'm 35. I turn 36 very soon this month. I turn 36 soon. So if I was to put my name down, I guess at the same time, like I had Edna, whatever. If I was to put my name down now, let's just say if I get through it, I have the money and I'm eligible, whatever. 7 years from now, I'll be 42.
We've got a super chat, and it will come through in a minute, so I might get interrupted by the notification. But we have a super chat from It's Sage. First of all, thank you so much. And it's saying that it's their 10th super on a live stream. So thank you so much, It's Sage, for the support and the continued support. And It's Sage says, knowing that kids are born without consent, I think it makes it even more important for parents to provide every resource on the planet to give them the best life. Exactly. If someone does have a kid or is going to have a kid, then they need to be ready and willing and able to give that kid the best shot possible at life, because like positive things generally, oh, here we go,
raise them to be
warriors against evil. So yeah, like positive things generally aren't just handed to you on a platter, but bad things can just very easily come around and knock you on your ass. So it's very important to, yeah, if you're going to have a kid, whether biological or adopted, to give that kid the best shot possible. Obviously, you have a strong obligation to do that if you adopt the child, because you've taken that responsibility on. But I think it's even stronger if you've created the child, because you've created the need itself for that. So yeah, 100%. Okay, but thank you so much for the support again.
I don't know, because like people say they don't know the cutoff age. It's somewhere in your 40s. So I don't know the age, but yeah, then I can just like get cut off and said, sorry, you're too old to adopt now. So yeah. There's no need, like, so yeah, like you're saying like, oh, it's net good. And you're like, well, yeah, if there was a need for it, like if you're in other, like, and some people say like, oh, you should adopt from like third world countries or something. And it's like, yeah, but like, you can't like in Australia, and I assume other countries, like other Western countries, you can't legally adopt from certain other countries because of human trafficking reasons.
But for me, all these arguments are just like, it's like someone saying, like it's often hard to adopt like dogs from homes and stuff, because you go to all these like rescue places online and you see all these dogs and
could you foster instead? I don't like know obviously the situation in Australia, but like I'm pretty sure in the UK you get like an allowance to foster, so it's even that you get paid. I might be wrong on that, but like if money is an issue, maybe she could foster.
It's like, you must have this, you must have that, you must have that. Oh, by the way, you can't have kids in the house. Oh, the dog is not good with cats. Oh, by the way, you'll need to take them on 96 walks a day. They have like a urinary infection, or where they need to pee like 96 times. Oh, and this and that and that. And it's like, well, but then the kind of natalist, as it were, response to that is, yeah, so I guess I just went to a breeder and bought a puppy, because of like all that. Like I basically don't see any of these arguments.
There was children like, but there was like dogs to adopt, whereas like there isn't children that need adopting. And like I said, in third world countries, well, you could say there's a difference between, oh, it's too difficult, but there's a difference between it's too difficult or I can't legally adopt a child from.
I thought she said that it, because I misunderstood at the start. I thought she said that it wasn't that that there's not enough children to adopt. It's that she didn't have enough money. But then obviously the circumstances are that like you could just wait some time and earn the money, presumably. And if you can't earn that money, then do you have the money that would make you an adequate parent if you create the child in the first place? Especially given like you have no idea like what child you're going to create. You could create a child that has some like special needs where they have unusually high expenses, like you need to cover medical bills and stuff. So, because she was saying like it's, you know, you don't have to have the money if you have a biological child, because she was saying with adoption there's like a 20k upfront fee or something. But like that's not necessarily true. Like you need to have a big buffer if you're going to have a, like obviously you shouldn't have a biological child anyway, but if you're going to be responsible, you should have a big buffer of money, because you don't know what costs you're going to incur through creating that child. They may have high medical costs, or some other costs, maybe non-medical. And if you save the money to have the buffer, then why not just use that to pay the adoption fees, or save a bit more if the adoption fees are higher or whatever?
Russia or whatever.
But there are...
I think it does ultimately just come down to she wants a child. And that will be the case for many pronatalists. It's just the case that they want the child and they come up with the arguments afterwards. Which doesn't mean the arguments are invalid, but it's like, we all see where it comes back to.
You can't adopt, like there's a lot of kids to adopt in Russia, but they won't allow you to.
Okay, yeah, in any case though, I guess my argument is like this would be the same as just like you find no dogs that you're able to adopt, so instead you buy one from a breeder. I guess that's the analogy I'm making. In any case, there are loads of kids in need of adoption. I don't know about the exact numbers. Maybe you have the figures. You're saying that there's too many.
No, there's more people on the waiting list waiting to adopt children than there is children to adopt. Because I know,
okay.
I know people who have been on the, like, and that's the thing, like, oh, you adoption. I'm like, I know people who have been waiting.
I've just seen Florence has said in the chat, I find the frequent comparison with breeding animals strange. Those animals are born into a state of exploitation. Non-enslaved humans aren't. I'm not sure if that's in response to me or someone in the chat, but that's not always the case. Like, if in the example George is using, that an animal is bred to be a pet, right? Like, or a companion animal. Sure, I think it's unethical to breed them into existence, but I think it's unethical to breed humans into existence. But once the animal is bred into existence, and they're with a family as a companion animal, is it right to say they're being exploited for all their life? I don't know. Like, I think it's immoral because they shouldn't have been commodified initially, and they shouldn't have been bred initially. But given those harms already happened at the start of their life, and once we've got past that, once they're actually with the family, they're not, like, they're just part of that family. They're not, and we're assuming this is a good family and stuff like that. I wouldn't say that's a state of exploitation. They are just part of that family. Just like when you create a child, they're just part of that family, right? Like, many families love their dogs. They're part of the family. They cherish them. They buy them gifts. They don't do anything to harm the dog. You know, they want to do things to protect the dog. So actually, in that example, it seems analogous. It doesn't seem like they're bred into a state of exploitation. So yeah, I mean, maybe someone would say, oh, well, it is a state of exploitation because the family are benefiting off of the dog existing through their enjoyment. But that's the same with creating a child. Like, if we're calling that exploitation, then Emily is exploiting her child or future child because, I mean, she said it herself. She's having the child because she's going to enjoy having the child, right? So, yeah.
Years on the adoption list, and they didn't get a child. They got approved. They paid the money, and they were sitting there waiting, and they couldn't get. But the difference is that we have lots of animals, right? In, like, I don't know about England, but like, we have lots of animals sitting in the pound, and they're perfectly good, and they don't have any of these other stuff that they could they could adopt.
All right. Well, okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me phrase the question this way. If it was the case that in Australia there was only a few hundred dogs that could be adopted, and there was a giant waiting list for people to adopt dogs, would you accept a vegan saying, I just went and bought a dog from a breeder because I wanted a dog, but there's only 100 dogs available for adoption in Australia?
I'd have to think about the well, what kind of breeder, like, I mean, the conditions and stuff. So,
well, my point is there would be no, it doesn't matter what the conditions.
Yeah, what does it matter, the conditions? Like, it's not okay to breed and commodify animals, in my view. You're using them as a means to your own end.
You can provide well, we say adopt, don't shop, because we know that there's lots of dogs losing their lives because they don't get adopted. But I don't know.
But even if there weren't any dogs that needed adopting, in my view, that wouldn't make breeding animals for our benefit suddenly okay. It's just worse that we're in a world where that happens whilst loads of animals are here needing adoption.
Some vegans are against pets and some vegans aren't against pets.
Well, I'd say
give them, I guess.
I would say it's an inherent part of veganism that we're against the concept of pets, as in like breeding animals to use as like domestic, you know, toys and whatever it is. We just have a pro-adoption stance, and I guess that kind of intersects with antinatalism in that way, I guess, is my part of my point. Because what I'm saying is, I think kind of the arguments you were using a moment ago, it would sound like to me someone saying, I really, really, really want a dog, and you know, as a vegan, I believe in adopt, don't shop, but I really, really, really want a dog. Like, I'd be really, really upset if I couldn't have one. And there's only 100 dogs up for adoption in Australia. And, you know, the waiting list is 7 years' time and blah, blah, blah. And there's all these requirements. So I'm thinking about buying from a breeder. That's how I see the kind of native
no, but that just shows that. Okay, first of all, like, saying there's only 100 dogs. Well, no, as in those 100 dogs have already been adopted. There's no dogs to adopt. So that's very different to there's heaps of dogs in pound.
Oh yeah, and I've just seen Cami in the chat say something which is very true. It's like she was saying she's going to raise her kid vegan, in like a vegan environment, and her kid's going to stay vegan, and at the same time, it seems like she's kind of exposing certain views that she has that don't align with veganism. So it's like, I mean, how reliable is this vegan education her kid's going to get?
That need to be adopted.
No, I'm talking about if there was only 100 dogs waiting to be adopted in Australia, like you wouldn't.
But there is no children waiting to be adopted because they all got adopted. Like as soon as they get put up for adoption, it's like they have someone. They just got to do the paperwork. So if it takes a couple of months to adopt, it's not because the child is waiting 2 months. It's because the child is just waiting for that paperwork to go through. But they always have a home they always have parents waiting to come and get that child.
Maybe we're getting our wires crossed a bit here and we're getting bogged down in the sort of minute details. I guess what I'm trying to basically say is I just think ultimately breeding is like buying from a breeder. Whereas,
like, it depends if you believe in domesticating animals or not. Because I as a vegan only believe in like reducing the suffering of like animal cruelty, like not being cruel to animals. I also believe in human rights and not being cruel to humans. But I don't believe that, bringing children into the world is...
What is she like? I don't know if it's the vegan position that we're against animal cruelty. Like, everyone says they're against animal cruelty. The point of veganism in my eyes is that we think animals should have rights, not be commodified, should be given the moral value that would be afforded to a human with the same level of cognitive ability, or the same level of sentience, however you want to put it. It's not necessarily about cruelty, right? Because, I mean, if you're like cruel to an animal, like if there was a farm where the animals were not like subjected to cruel practices, but they were genuinely given very good lives, and then let's say when they were asleep one time, they were fully sedated and then killed, that wouldn't make it okay, but I don't know if you'd be able to label that as cruel. I mean, maybe you would still be able to label that as cruel. I don't know if cruel would be the appropriate term, but the point is that, cruelty is not the subject of veganism in my eyes. And it just makes her claim that like she's going to be able to raise the kid vegan even more questionable. But I mean, she's going to have the kid, so I guess we'll see.
Inherently cruel, just like I don't believe in like bringing, like I know this might be controversial for some vegans, but
also one thing I just want to say is like I do commend her for having this debate, because she's in a position where she's having the kid. Like, she's not going to be able to back out now how heavily pregnant she is. And it's like, it's very commendable to have this debate, but also have it like publicly where she knows she's going to get criticized. And she knows people like me could react to it and all this sort of stuff. So like, big up to her for that. Like, I 100% respect her for, like, standing up for her decision in like a public arena. 100% kudos to that.
I do believe in like breeding programs for species extinction. And I know I've had some arguments with people about how, oh no, but like, it's wrong to do that. I'm like, I don't think it's wrong.
Yeah, I think that might be something many vegans actually do have contentious points on. I think there are probably, I know it's that most vegans are against just the concept of breeding animals for some kind of purpose. But I think when it comes to the stuff like species extinction and breeding programs to like stop those animals from going extinct, whatever, maybe they do agree with those things, whatever. But were there any other? Let's try and get back to the nitty and the gritty now. Were there any other kind of points against antinatalism or that justified procreation that you wanted to kind of cover?
I'll have a look at my notes.
Yes, look at the notes.
Because like, it just depends on like your stance, but like obviously, because like some people say.
Okay, I'm gonna very quickly go in the other room and quickly get something to eat, and I will be back in literally 30 seconds. But like, we're only halfway through this bad boy, so yeah, I need to get something to at least help me tick over. So I will be back extremely quickly. Okay, and we're back. So, cool. Yeah, we're back. I am gonna start playing the video again and just mute myself so that I don't like rustle. But yeah, let's go.
All overpopulation, so I've got, but I know you're not for that. Like, I know your anti-natalist stance has nothing to do with population, but I do have like.
Well, actually, that is one of the reasons. I will say, yeah, I do think we're extremely overcrowded, and like, I don't know, if you were to take like the commute in London or Sydney or whatever, and you see that the tubes are just absolutely rammed with people, like Tokyo especially as well, and we have massive waiting lists now for cancer and all these kind of things. I would say that it's massively irresponsible just to pump out more humans into a system that is clearly like very overcrowded.
So, are you against immigration as well into your country?
It would depend on who the person is and what the.
You have resources, like you have limited resources, and the thing is that if English people, like English is in like whoever's a citizen or a resident, right? If English people, they have, like, if they don't have enough children, they'll just immigrate, like they'll just bring more people to immigrate into your country for sustainable economic growth.
Well, I don't want any country to exist, so I mean, it's not really my interest. I want there to be no humans on the planet. So,
yeah, I know that, but like, but you got into the point of overpopulation, so that has nothing to do with like the.
So it is true, like as a practical matter, that if if the population of a country doesn't procreate as much, this is obviously going to have knock-on impacts for the economy. Some of those knock-on impacts will be negative, ultimately. Some of them will be positive, but some of them will be negative. Overall, I don't know how it will go because the future is so uncertain. Like, population decline or birth rate decline could be negative, but that could be like leveled out or just made insignificant by AI. Who knows? But either way, I understand her point of like, oh, well, it maybe mean an increase in immigration. And, you know, immigration will obviously bestow certain benefits because it's addressing the decline of the native birth rate, but it can also bring negatives, like, you know, if cultural assimilation is not done well and stuff like that. And she's saying to avoid those negatives, I think what she's saying, to avoid those negatives, native population should be encouraged to procreate more than they are. That kind of doesn't wash with me, because even though there will be certain problems caused by a declining birth rate, it's not clear to me that we should use children as a way to solve our issues. Like, if we have issues as a society, should we be just creating children to solve the problems that we have to face? Does that mean that if I have like £10,000 of debt and I could wipe that debt off myself by creating a child and passing it on to them, does that make it ethical for me to create a child to solve my problems so that they then have to face either that problem or other problems? To me, that doesn't seem ethical. But yeah, let's continue.
The other anti-natalist points about not wanting any children in there. Sorry, not wanting any people.
But I mean, if my parents created me to say, George, we want to create you to for anti-immigration purposes, like, I wouldn't.
No. I'm not saying that. I'm saying with the whole overpopulation, you're saying, oh, well, if we had more kids, then there'll be more restraint on the resources. Okay, does that mean that you're also against immigration? Because they also do the same thing where they put more, like, because you've only got so many resources built, right? Like the tube, you've only got one resource built, and it's you know, and you have what was it? And would you be against like more people immigrating to the country because it's going to put a strain on the resources?
Yeah, it would just have to go. We'd just have to go over it with a fine-tooth comb, as if it were. There would be like a certain, you know, where jobs were needed, where they're not needed, kind of thing. I'm generally pro-immigration, but I'm also pro-immigration control, if that makes sense. So I think there needs to be controls, but I don't agree with just flooding the country with people, and I don't agree with people just popping out kids when there's clearly a huge strain on the services.
See, there's not a huge strain on the services here in Australia. We're like really good. Australia is underpopulated. We miss out on a lot of things that you may take for granted because we don't have the population. And so yeah, like I see the doctor today. I could not today because obviously it's nighttime. But if I wanted to see the doctor,
yeah, I have no idea about this. I don't know the state of Australia's population. Maybe if anyone in the chat is Australian, they can say whether they agree with her or not. But yeah, I'm not sure if what she's saying is true or not. I have no idea.
I just go straight away. I have all my like medical stuff except for one ultrasound I have to pay for, but like the rest is that, and then I get money. Like not that I'm doing it for that reason, obviously.
And it may be different in different places, right? Like Australia is massive. So certain places, obviously, there will be very few people. Other places, there will be a lot more people in cities. So, yeah, I don't know. Oh, she said she was in Sydney, didn't she? But yeah, so it'll be different in different areas of the country.
You know that I do want to have children. But
Yeah.
when I have a baby, I'll be getting like money from the government for having a baby because we want more. The government wants us to have more children. Our transportation is underdeveloped, but it's not overcrowded. And I mean, yeah, like I used to catch the train at peak hour and it would be fine. Like it would be a little bit crowded, but it's not like England or Tokyo or whatever. And yeah, there's so much space here as well. There's a lot of undeveloped, like there's a lot of empty land.
Yeah. Australia is just a giant fucking desert with like a few cities on the coast. It's a very, very weird country, to be honest.
Yeah, well, to be fair, there's a lot, like in the desert, the reason why people don't live there is because it's so inhabitable.
Yeah,
so when people are like, oh, you got land, I'm like, yeah, but we've got a lot of inhabitable land because I'm like, you know, kind of, it'll be a little bit more like Las Vegas, but not like, it would be like Las Vegas, like in the middle of the desert, but not like, but there's less water or something. That's what I asked. I said, why don't people live in the desert of like in Australia? You know, because other countries, like look at America, they're all like, you know, look at their states are all in the middle. Whereas us, it's like, we're all like on the outskirts. And they said, because they still have like really big water that goes into the things. So yeah, I mean, the thing with economic growth is that you're able to create, like with more humans that are educated, you're able to like come up with more solutions in like space and like infrastructure, like for example, like our trains, yeah, like we're not overcrowded, but our trains are really slow, which is so weird because in America, so I went to America and the trains are just as slow, but they have so much population and it's like, but they don't have like fast trains and stuff like you guys, like in Europe and England and stuff, you guys have fast trains, you know, like because I went to England and I know that it was really quick and everything. So I don't know, like America's a little bit backwards there.
The conversation's kind of gone on a tangent about the speed of trains and stuff, but I think she just said the speed of trains in the UK is fast. I don't know what trains she's been on, but our trains here are really not like amazing.
They don't care about their people. That's the thing. I remember when I went to America and they were like, and these two people from Texas were like, oh, you should drive to the city. And I said, oh, I don't really want to drive to the city because I rented a car. Yeah. I said, I don't really want to drive. They're like, oh, we'll just get Uber. And I'm like, well, isn't there any public transport? They're like, no. And I was like, really? Yeah. And no, hang on. And then I asked some people at a hostel. After them, I asked some people at a hostel and they said, oh, why don't you just catch the bus in? I said, I didn't know there was public transport. They're like, yeah, there's a bus. And so I took the bus. You know how much it cost me?
How much?
$2.20. It was like, it was so ridiculously small. And I was like, these people, Americans, were trying to say, no, just catch an Uber and pay like $30 or $40 instead of paying like $2.20 and just catching the bus. It's just like some of their mentality as well. Yeah. In cars, but there obviously is a lot of Americans would prefer public transport, but like they don't fucking upgrade that. So it's like you've got the population here in Australia. It's different because it's like, well, you know, we don't have the population to like, you know, to fund into like having more public transport, like as in, you know, to have more like trains and buses and stuff, and like I get that, but like in America, it's like you've got the people. If you upgraded the system, to be actually nice and pleasant, then more people will use it, and then they can like don't have to use their cars and stuff. But anyway, America. But yeah, I think that, but no, I'm saying like you were like all the resources and stuff. Okay, but like here in Australia, we have plenty of resources, and we don't have enough people to actually develop this stuff. And like I think that you know, we have prosperous when we have population growth, but not too much growth, but not. That's the thing I've been reading about the economy, and it's you got to have a fine line. You've got to grow, but it can't be. You can't be smaller than that. Like you can't reduce, but you can't grow too fast. You can't reduce really fast. Yeah.
Well, I guess my point is kind of what really is the interest of a non-existent child to come into the existence and improve infrastructure or improve resources or anything like that, which are things that only are needed anyway for people already in existence. We can work on ways while we do exist to improve life in the countries that we're in. But I don't see this as some kind of burden for the non-existent to satisfy. I don't see the point in creating. I don't see the point in creating new people, new suffering beings who will cause suffering to other beings as a result of their existence, just to say, oh, my child did this for the economy or something. I just think these are pointless, kind of arbitrary things forced on us once we are alive in this system that we're ultimately slaves to, cogs in a giant machine.
We're slaves.
But we spend most of it. We might not be. There's degrees of slavery to an extent. I think we're not slaves like animals, and farmed animals are slaves. We're not slaves like that in a super literal sense. But in a sense, we absolutely are slaves because we're born into a system that we didn't consent to being forced on us, and we have no real choice but to actually abide by the rules of that system.
Yeah, you're a slave to your biological desires as well, right? Like, you constantly need to like eat, drink water, find ways to amuse yourself so you don't get bored, like all these things. Like, there are many ways that because we exist in a flesh suit, right, that has certain needs and instills certain desires in us, like, you could call us slaves to those.
Or face massive suffering, be it that being out in the cold or being homeless or facing imprisonment.
Does that make you feel like better or worse about being alive? For you personally, being alive?
Well, there's no need for me to have been born, so it doesn't like.
No, I'm not asking that. I'm just saying, like, you being alive already. There's the thought of like this pointless, there's like life is pointless type of thing. Does that make you feel better about the situations you have to deal with, or does that make you feel worse?
So I don't know what George is going to say, but interestingly for me, that whole contemplation has kind of made my life a bit better, I think, just because it's lowered the expectations I have for how well life can or probably will go. So if your expectations are lower, then usually more of your expectations are met. Maybe she would say that that's kind of like depressing, but I don't see why it's depressing that you've now adapted to the situation you're in such that more of your expectations are being met than maybe hers will be. Do you get what I mean? So
I don't necessarily take the position that life is pointless. I think once we're born, I think there's important things that while I'm here, I can actually try to reverse. But these are all humanity's doing.
Yeah, it's the creation of lives is pointless.
These are all like, while I'm in existence, yeah, there's a load of shit things that I will need to kind of be here to actually reverse. But I don't see any of these. These were all kind of interests that were developed as a result of me and as of a sad result of humans infecting this planet.
What makes you think you're infecting the planet?
Well, you as a vegan know that we are. Like, look at all the horrible shit that we're doing all over the earth. Like
but we're the only ones that have sentience to actually be able to understand that. Again, animals still suffer in the wild. Like, it's not like everybody was like living in the Garden of Eden and then Adam and Eve come along and ruined it all. Like, you know what I mean? It's like this.
Well, we ruined a lot, didn't we? We I'm not saying life for wild animals was great before we were here, but number one, we haven't improved life for wild animals. Number two, I don't think we will improve life for wild animals. And number three, we domesticated animals. Their ancestors are wild animals, and we colonized them. We rounded them up, enslaved them, raped them, murdered them, and they're now the slaves in our modern food system. So I don't think that we've infected this planet. Human history has just been a complete blight, a complete stain on this planet. All that we've brought to this planet is war, rape, slavery, bloodshed, and murder. I don't see any kind of good argument for it.
And if we're talking about like the good things for humans, like the only good things we've brought have been needed because we created humans in the first place. So I used the example of modern medicine before. You could also use the example of like telecommunications. So like actually social media isn't that amazing, but our ability to communicate with people in the modern way, done responsibly, is good. Although obviously it isn't always used responsibly. but that was only needed because we continued the human species. Like, if for whatever reason 1,000 years ago everyone decided not to procreate, it wouldn't then be a bad thing they never got telecommunications. It wouldn't be a bad thing that they didn't continue to develop telecommunications, because the only reason telecommunications would have been a benefit is if they had continued.
I had murder, like rape.
Yes. Yep.
You know, they have all those.
And I wish, but that doesn't mean we should just, that doesn't give us an excuse to.
Of course not, but we are the only ones. Like animals don't, or at least don't act on morality. Where we do, we have the idea of, you know, ultimately getting, like, improving the earth and improving life.
Yeah, but it's not happened. We've had how many years to do this now? Hundreds of thousands of years, and we've just not done anything. All we've done is
it's
dominate the
earth. For you, but maybe not. Like, in general, like, maybe it's not that long. I don't know. It depends that's your perception. It's been a long time. That's your perception that it's been a long time.
Well, I think we can all agree we've been here for too long and not actually done anything good to this. What have we done that was good? Like, we've been here like for hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years if you're talking about our ancestors and stuff that we've actually evolved from. But what have we done on this planet in our whole existence to actually say, thank God humans came into existence? Like, look at all the things we've created. We've created animal agriculture, child trafficking, slavery, war, religion, all of these things that have just been have been a complete blight on this planet.
Well, I mean, has it? I mean, yeah. Wild animals, they torture.
I'm not denying that.
As well.
But yeah, so, but how does that mean that that human existence has been good just because wild animals do that horrible shit? I mean, I don't want wild animals.
They're animals as well. So
yeah,
like, and that's the thing. But I'm saying that, like, well, I believe that we're a higher sentience. So this is the only reason why. Like, do you think that, like, a cat, a dog, or a cow thinks about, you know, like, ones that are free to, you know, do you think they're kind of thinking, oh, should I bring kittens into the world? Because otherwise, most likely they're going to suffer and die. Like, the fact that we're able to even have this conversation shows, like, it's a higher cognitive thing. Yep. So
I might be misunderstanding her, because I actually did zone out for like 5 seconds there, but is that not the same argument that non-vegans use when they say, you know, well, you know, these animals, they're not as, you know, cognitively developed as us. The fact that we're able to have this conversation, you know, shows that we're, like, higher. Maybe I don't know. To be honest, I did zone out for 5 seconds. So maybe I misunderstood what she was saying.
Would you think improve over time? Like, I mean, think about it. Think about the improvement we've had in human development. Obviously, like, there's certain countries, let's not mention who, but like, look.
Yeah, but again, those developments are only beneficial because we continued the human species. If we hadn't have continued the human species, that would not be a loss that we didn't develop those things.
Don't know who, but, like, you know, the Western countries pretty good. Like, we have pretty good human rights here, and, like,
well, yeah, it took us long enough though. It's fucking, yeah. If you look at medieval times and shit, and just the horrific thing, like, I don't think it was ever justified that all those humans were sacrificed on the altar of, oh, one day there will be a nice society where, and actually, you could even make the argument due actually to animal agriculture, that despite if you take medieval England, for example, it was much more brutal, much more brutal from a human perspective. But there's probably now the actual argument that there's probably actually more suffering now in England when we're more progressive and have more rights, because we've now got these giant fucking factory farms.
Oh, right. I mean, we're working on that, though.
Well, but
to say we're working on that, it's a bit, I mean, I know that people are working on that, but it's a bit flippant.
But 99.9% of the world is not vegan. It's not, we're not working
animals
on it well
aren't enough. Animals aren't as sentient as humans.
Yeah.
As well.
But
I think it impacts someone more, just like it would affect.
She seems to be progressively getting less and less vegan as this conversation goes on. So I'm getting less and less sure of her sort of commitment or ability to raise a child vegan.
Like you know, a cow would suffer more than a fly.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the higher awareness.
Yeah, but
like, animals are pretty good. Like they're kind of just like until they don't have the anxiety. Like, they're kind of like, they'll be like, you know, doing their thing, and then if they hear something, then they'll be like, then they get a bit worried. But then if it goes away, they're like, yeah, they can just like easily go back to it. Whereas like humans aren't like that. We're constantly like thinking about the future and like have anxiety for that, but where animals don't.
Yeah, but what's the overall point you're making here? Is it that we need to be here, or that our existence has overall been good on the planet? What is it you're saying?
No, I'm just saying, like you were saying, oh, but now we've got factory farms, and I'm like, yeah, but I still feel like humans would suffer more in a factory farm than an animal in a factory farm.
But you don't have to put either in a factory farm. What?
Because of our
but that's not any kind of argument that I'm.
No, you just said that. Oh, it's worse now because of the factory farms than it was back then. And I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure that it was.
Oh no. Back then. Oh, okay. No.
Even if you think animals have less of a capacity to suffer, doesn't mean that it automatically isn't worse now than it was before. Like, sure, animals probably have less of a spectrum, less of an array of ways that they can suffer. But in the ways they can suffer, they likely suffer much more than us. Like, I'm sat here and there's a pig in a factory farm. Just because I have a wider variety of ways that I can suffer doesn't mean that the actual suffering in my life that I'm experiencing is worse than the suffering of a pig. And even these like higher order levels of suffering that people appeal to, like existential anxiety or looking at the future or looking at the past, why is that worse than the more base levels of suffering, like being physically stabbed? Like, I'm sure a pig being like castrated without anesthetic or stabbed in the throat or scolded or branded is worse than me having like existential anxiety.
But animals are still sentient enough for there sufficiently to be much more suffering. And if you look at the work of like Richard Dawkins, for example, he mentions that animals likely feel pain more than humans do because humans are more intelligent. And animals' pain receptors have to give them a really strong warning to say, don't do that again. You and I, we don't need to stick our hand in a fire to know that that's going to fuck our hand up, right? Mm-hmm. There are certain animals where if they get closer to that fire, they might feel that burning sensation in a more intense way than we would, because their pain receptors are saying, don't do that again, don't do that again. It's a warning signal. So the horrific thing is when those chickens and pigs are being boiled alive, and this is happening right now in the UK and in Australia, mm-hmm. they're probably feeling it in a more intense way than we would, or than a human being tortured in medieval times or whatever would, which is the truly horrific thing about what we're doing to animals as well.
Yeah, I think the problem that I have with your stance is the fact that like you think life in general is pointless. And I know you say, oh, but I'm like, that's what.
That's not what he said. He even said earlier that he doesn't think life is pointless in every way.
All your stuff is leading to, like, there's no point in being alive. Because of like.
It's not that there's no point in being alive. It's that there's no point, or there's nothing in a philanthropic sense motivating us, or there's no necessity to create a new individual.
The suffering. I'm like, I do think there's a point to life. I think that is the point of life, is to be alive.
Often people try to, I don't know if it's deliberate or not deliberate or unintentional, sorry, but often people try to like twist antinatalism to make it look as if it's like nihilism, which is kind of what she's doing here. I think probably unintentionally. But it's just like, they're very they're distinct concepts.
There's points that we can create for ourselves once we do exist. Like now that I exist, I have motives and stuff in life. I have a point to living. I have a point to doing certain things. I have goals that I want to achieve and desires that I want to act out.
And you wouldn't have that if you weren't brought into existence.
Right, and that would be good because I didn't want any of these wills assigned to me.
Yeah, and if he fails to fulfill them, then that's going to be bad for him now he exists. But that wouldn't be an issue if he was never created.
I never chose any of these.
Want that?
Sorry?
What happens if someone does want that?
Well, the only time they would want that is once they've been created. So if you were thinking about creating someone who would want that, you wouldn't be doing them a disservice or a harm by not creating them, because the instillment of wanting that would come at the point that you create them.
Well, if they don't exist, they don't want anything.
Yeah, but once they're in the world and they know, then most of the time they don't want to leave.
Yeah, but that's once they're in the world. We're talking about whether to create them or not.
So it just shows that most of the time they want to be.
And again, often the reason they don't want to leave, or they don't leave, as in end their life, is for all the reasons that I said before.
In existence.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I think this is just how humans are prisons of their own brains. Like, if you're talking about suicide, it's an incredibly hard thing for our animal brains to actually enact. But that no less means that our life is an absolute prison cell, and that we're kind of forced into. I mean, people even in the absolute worst living situations possible still don't commit suicide, which just shows what a kind of trap life is in many ways. I mean, there's little girls being married off at 3 years old or whatever it is and being acid attacked in certain cultures. Yeah, if they like forego an arranged marriage or whatever, they'll get like acid thrown in their face and be disfigured for life. This happens in places like Pakistan, for example. A little girl will forego their arranged marriage. They'll say, I don't want to marry this 8-year-old boy or whatever it is, and they'll get acid thrown in their face. You can see this online. And even they don't commit suicide, even though they say my life is a blessing from God. So this just proves what I mean, people can read more into this. David Benatar's book, Better Never to Have Been, talks about how we have what's called optimism bias. Our brain irrationally calculates the good in our life to be worth more than the bad, essentially, for there to be this kind of point in living, but ultimately, we're forcing people into a prison of their own mind, where even if they're getting raped, acid attacked, trafficked, they still don't want to commit suicide. And then natalists will use this idea that, oh, well, you'd commit suicide if it was so bad, whatever. They kind of use that to prove some kind of point, when even the people they know, people they agree with, should not have been created. The people they surely agree with live a net negative life. Even they don't commit suicide. So I don't really agree with this whole point of whatever you were saying a few minutes ago about, even these people, like they still have a point to living and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, we do have desires and stuff to stay alive once we are alive, because we're genetic survival machines and we're just programmed to stay alive at all costs. But that doesn't mean it was in our best interest to create us. It was actually in our best interest to not create us. We have no need to have all this suffering forced upon us, all these horrific things. If you want to, the book Better Never to Have Been, it opens with this great statement, something like, most parents believe that the best thing to do as a parent is to take their children out of harm's way. Yet they fail to realize that the best way to take your children out of harm's way is to not have them at all.
Well, that's your belief, but I think that, like humans have...
Yeah, I really like that quote as well. I usually butcher it, and to be fair, George did butcher it as well, but it's easily done. But I can get it up now. So I won't share my screen because it would just be more effort than it's worth. But it's the full quote is, "It's curious that while good people go to great lengths to spare their children from suffering, few of them seem to notice that the one and only guaranteed way to prevent all of the suffering of their child is not to bring those children into existence in the first place," which is very true. And parents will go to such great lengths to spare their children of suffering or prevent suffering from coming onto their children. The only thing they won't do is not have those children, because that would mean the parents sacrificing their desire to have a child.
Innate value. I think that saying that, oh, well, there's no point to life means like there's no value to it. But I think that it is valuable.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, this whole no point to life thing that you're saying, I'm not saying that once we're alive, there's no point to life. I'm saying there's no point to procreate. I believe that you have a point to life. I believe that I have a point to life now that we're here. Our point to life, in my opinion, is to be vegan and to undo the animal holocaust, which is another one of the fucked up things that humans are responsible for, and why I think humans have just been a complete blight and a shit stain on this planet. But before you and I were born, there was no point to our parents having us other than their own desires. My parents had me because they wanted to have me. Your parents had you because they wanted, but they didn't have us for us. They had us for them.
Yeah, but I don't see that anything wrong with that.
All right, okay. But do you, as vegans, right, we are against the idea of using others for our own interests, for our own means. Do you not think that then that's kind of a contradictory point in some way?
I don't think we're using our children.
Well, sure we are. We're saying I'm going to...
Yeah, of course you're using your children. Why is she having her children in the first place? Because she desperately wants a child. So she's using the child as a way to satiate that desire.
Create a little clone of me, a little mini me, because I want to have you. It's like a little pet human that we're having. It's
okay,
like,
but some people, hang on, I just want to do the whole against mini me thing. It's cheaper for me to use my own egg, right? Yeah. If I was to have to use, and there's people who don't have eggs, or they're got ruined. So they would they would get a donor egg and there's donor sperm, put them together and put it in there. And when they have their kid, that's not a mini-me. So
Right.
there's a lot of people who will do that. And so this whole, you just want to create a mini-me. I'm like, no. But like, obviously I'm going to use my own eggs. I'm not going to use someone else's eggs. Use my eggs.
Yeah.
And also the donor, I'm using a donor sperm. So I don't really care to create a mini version of my donor.
But
so
you're still having a kid, right? For ultimately for self-serving purposes. It's to satisfy you rather than for some kind of altruistic cause, right?
Yes, but I also don't believe there's anything wrong with bringing children into the world, and I think that it's a net positive to have children.
No, but thing is, the way she's framing it is not the best ethical framing. Like the way that an antinatalist would frame it is that you're satiating or attempting to satiate your own desire, also knowing that another desire will just pop up straight after. You're attempting to satiate your desire to have a child with by imposing suffering and ultimately death on someone else. That's the point. Like there's no issue with you satiating a desire. It's that you're using unethical means to satiate that desire.
And people and continue on life.
Yeah, I'm just not fully convinced by any kind of altruistic argument for having children. I think people use these clever sounding altruistic arguments just for the selfish reason that they want to have a kid, especially the wild animal suffering.
Selfish means that you don't consider other people in. Okay, so selfish doesn't mean that you do something for oneself. It's when you do, because people do things for themselves all the time, but it doesn't make them selfish. I'm doing this for myself, but I have considered everything. Like that's why when I got a donor, I made sure that it was a donor that was going to be involved in her life, because I'm considering her happiness, and I've considered like what kind of life I'm bringing her into, how much money I have, the resources I have.
That's kind of gaslighty though. Like imagine if she was saying this to her child, like she's saying, look at all the things I've done for you, like, you know, I secured a more appropriate donor for you and blah, blah, XYZ. Like you can list off all these things. But first of all, given you're creating a child, like giving them the best shot at life, which is presumably what you're trying to demonstrate you're doing, that's an obligation you have to them anyway. It's not some sort of virtuous act you're doing. And the second thing is, you're the one who put them in the position where they needed all that stuff in the first place. And then you added a load of harm on top of that with creating them. Obviously, they're going to experience harm. So it kind of seems gaslighty to me to point to all these things you've done with reference to your child when all of those things were just meeting an obligation you had, and you've imposed loads of harm on that child as well.
The support network that I have in case I die, I've thought about all these things because I am not selfish. I've considered my decision, how it's going to impact my family, how it's going to impact my daughter. So it's not selfish because I have considered other people in this, like everybody involved.
Yeah.
Yes, I am doing it for oneself, but I have considered other people and the baby.
But these things you're all considering are all just weighing up just the moral obligations. Those are just the moral obligations you need to serve as a mother for bringing someone into existence who you need not bring into existence in the first place. I'm talking about when a parent chooses to procreate, they're not actually doing it because they believe they're not doing it because it's some kind of good altruistic thing to do for the world. And they're doing it foregoing the idea of all the suffering that they're going to create and just thinking, well, I want one. I want a child. And yeah, okay, some animals might be murdered here or there. I'm willing to take that risk. Yeah, my child might be raped or murdered. Yeah, my child will probably get cancer one day. But, I just want one. So that to me is kind of the reckless, selfish gamble that people take as parents by choosing to procreate.
You do that with everything you do, in your decision making. You're taking a gamble. When you get into a car, you're taking a gamble that you could accidentally hit someone.
Fuck's sake. I just did like a whole... So... fuck's sake. Sorry, I was on mute again because I'd been eating. So, yeah, what I was saying is what she's got to appreciate with this whole driving thing is that like with driving, it's an example. Can you guys hear me now? Okay. You can hear me now? Yeah, you can hear me, right? I'm pretty sure you can hear me. So, yeah, what I was saying is with the driving example, like she's got to appreciate that yeah, like with the driving example, it's kind of a practical necessity. Like George, me, all of us here, we weren't the ones who chose to put ourselves in this situation, right? Now we exist. All of us have these needs and desires and need to be able to live a reasonable life. And yeah, we find ourselves in this situation of this complex web of interactions with others, and we may harm others. But we've got to be able to use certain technologies and do certain things to be able to lead a reasonable life with the appreciation that it's not going to be perfect, but we didn't put ourselves in this situation. The best we can do is navigate life the best we can and not create someone else and put them in this situation, right? So the whole driving thing, like, yes, like George or anyone who drives is taking a risk, but it's out of practical necessity in a situation they didn't choose to be in. Whereas with having a child, like you can live your life like very reasonably without having a child. Yeah, you're when you create a child, you're introducing someone else into this complex web where they can't help but put others at risk or harm others once they exist, if you get what I mean. So it's like, one is out of practical necessity, simply to be able to like exist and have a reasonable life yourself. And the other is just like you like wanting to satisfy your desire to have a kid and force them into the same like complex web that you're in the first place.
And yes, you're taking into the moral considerations of all the things of, oh, I'm going to drive under the speed limit, I'm going to follow the rules, and I'm going to like be vigilant and stuff. But ultimately, when you get into the car, you do certain other things that you enjoy, you're not necessarily like you could cause harm to another person.
Yeah, sure. No, there are many things I do in my life that I would totally admit.
Like, imagine if someone knowingly put their child at risk. Like they put their, they like, sent their child into a very dangerous area, knowing they could get mugged there. And then when someone confronted them, they said, well, you drive a car. Do you get what I mean? It just doesn't land, does it?
That are to a certain extent selfish. But I think one of the most self-serving, whatever you want to call it. But I think one of the most selfish things we can do, one of the most self-serving, whatever you want to call it, things we can do is procreate. And hey,
why is the most?
Because you're creating all of this harm and suffering and
I'm not creating harm and suffering. I'm creating a person
who will be harmed and who will suffer.
Yeah, with a nervous system and a brain who will suffer, who needed not exist.
No, she did not need. She did not need to exist. Like, it's one of those things where
I think she might have misunderstood George's wording there. I think what he meant was she didn't need to exist. Like, it wasn't necessary to create her.
That is life. Like, in order to get the good things, you have to risk the bad things.
No, but why? Okay, but why impose that risk on someone else? Like, I just see that as totally unfair. Like, parents even say life isn't fair. They say, when you tidy your room as a kid, right? You would have said, no, your mum would have said to you, Emily, got to tidy your room, and you would have said, but mum, that's not fair. And your mum said back to you,
well, it was more my dad said, life isn't fair.
Right.
I'm not planning to be one of those stupid parents anyway.
Well, there's a difference between the parent you plan to be and the parent you actually will be. I'm not saying she will be a bad parent. What I'm saying is, like, people have this idealized concept or conception in their head of what their future is going to be like, and they just don't know what it's going to be like. Like, imagine if she had a child and then she became like severely disabled in some way. Maybe Emily gets into a car crash or something like that. Obviously, I don't want any of this to happen, but like, you can't guarantee that you will be the competent parent that you want to be. And I have no doubt she has the most noble of intentions and she wants to do the best for her future child. But we live in a world where you can't guarantee that you will even be capable of doing that.
Yeah, so like I guess it's like not just the potential for happiness and fulfillment, but like I reckon they will. Like everybody does have happiness and fulfillment, just like most people. Like
the only two things we can actually guarantee our child though is suffering and death.
And taxes.
Yeah, there's a good chance your child will have happiness and fulfillment in many areas of their life. But number one,
I can guarantee that they're going to have some kind of happiness.
Well, you can't actually guarantee it, because they might be born with, unless they know already by the pregnancy scan, I don't know, they might be born with some debilitating condition like Stephen Hawking has, or whether it's paralyzed from very early on, or
you don't think that they have the ability to have happiness?
Not in any meaningful way, really.
I don't know. I think that Stephen Hawking done a lot of things that I think are very fulfilled in.
Hawking did, but I've seen some horrific footage of people. Like there was this guy in the UK who had to get the right to die. Tony Nicholson, his name was. This was an awful case. He had like locked-in syndrome, and he was trying to get the UK government to give him the right to die. And the UK government kept saying, no, we won't give you the right to die. And he ended up, I think, going to Dignitas in Switzerland, where they could give him the poison antidote thing to kill himself. But he could hardly move a muscle. Like this guy who was once a young, handsome rugby player, he spent the rest of his life just sitting in a chair.
I think I heard about this case.
You know, in his own waste, just like crying, and just his every single second was torture. Every single second, waking second of his life was torture. And I think one of the hugest gambles actually we can take by procreating is having one of those children who has such a debilitating condition that every waking second is just torture for them. And they will have no...
And he ended his life though?
He did end his life, but after much fighting for the legal system. Well, his wife had to do the fighting because he couldn't write a single or say, he couldn't speak, he couldn't write anything. So his wife, he could only, he had to type through a computer for his eyes. He would just literally look at a screen like that, and I think he'd blink like to say enter. Like it'd take him like an hour to write a fucking sentence, the poor guy. Yeah, he did ultimately end his life. But do you not think that it was unethical that his parents had him because he was forced into that situation? Like that was one of the, this could happen to even if you're, and I strongly hope this doesn't.
Yeah, especially if the parents are aware of this, right? Like if the parents are literally given a list of the things that can happen to their child, and one of them on there is locked-in syndrome or whatever it was called. Like maybe his parents could plead ignorance, this sort of stuff. You know, a lot of people do act just off of ignorance. But like if his parents were made aware, like your child could get locked-in syndrome, are you willing to take this risk on their behalf? Then it's like, yeah, of course they acted immorally. Like they knew the potential consequences. They went ahead and did it anyway. If they hadn't have created them, there would have been no one in existence to be harmed. So there wouldn't have been something wrong done. Yeah, it's crazy.
Happen to your little girl. Even if it doesn't happen to your little girl at birth, this is one of the things that could happen to her later in life. So these are just the horrific gambles that we take as a parent, like that I just don't think is worth it. I don't think we have the right to impose such horrific risk on someone else.
I think that we do have the right, like we do risk it, you know, because it's, I don't know, like you have that's the point of life. I don't know. Otherwise it wouldn't be any life. I don't know.
Well, good. Well, as I say, I'm not just an antinatalist, I'm an ethicist as well. I wish that there was just no sentient life at all. I think that sentience was the biggest curse to ever happen to the planet, unfortunately. Like
we'll have to ask God, why did you create us?
Yeah, I think it
would be interesting to see how you created us.
Should we take some questions now, Emily? What do you think, or was there anything?
Questions are good. I'm just gonna go to the toilet.
Yeah.
Okay, so they've now gotten to the point where they're taking questions. So that's the end of the actual debate. But I think I'm going to continue because I actually feel okay. Now that I've had that food, I got to admit I was flagging when I had that, before I had that food. Not that it was very substantial, but yeah, I'm feeling okay now. So let's continue. There's only half an hour left. So this will be questions. But before we start, I am going to very quickly go get some water. So I'm just going to be 30 seconds, if that. And we're back.
Let's go. All right, cool. I'll get reading some comments. Right. I'm gonna look through a few of the live stream chats. Oh, blimey! I haven't even been looking. I see that it's getting very. It says, how common are those cases, though? The government didn't give him that right because it's a slippery slope. Yeah, it wouldn't matter if it even was the case that it...
Okay, hang on. Hang on a minute, hang on. I am blocking the view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to... Why is it not allowing me to move myself? I'm going to move myself up here. Oh. Like that. Okay.
Happened to just one person out of a trillion. I don't think we should appeal to popularity. Otherwise, it would be like a million carnists saying, but we get the pleasure from eating this one tasty giant pig that could feed 1 billion of us, or something like that. I don't think that any amount of happiness in the world that people could experience is worth even one person suffering what Tony Nicholson did and being a prisoner inside his own body. I don't think that a giant amount of suffering... I don't think that one person suffering...
We have a super chat from Bovine Blue Stocking. So, first of all, here we go.
World and we raise them
to be warriors against evil. So, first of all, thank you so much for the support. And Bovine Blue Stocking says, I admire your stamina, Lawrence. The secret to this one was Twiglets. I don't usually had Twiglets, but I had some in. So they've helped me get it through it. I'd prefer something more substantial, but I've just come back from a week away. So I don't have much stuff in, and the stuff I do have in, I couldn't quickly prepare and stuff. So I've just got some Twiglets and some water, and that has helped me get through the stream. I actually don't know how long we've been going now. We're coming up to 3 hours. Fucking hell. So, yeah, so, cool. Okay. But, yeah, thank you so much for the support, and I will try keep my stamina up. I've got 2, super chat notifications, but I can only see 1 super chat. Okay, hopefully I haven't missed the super chat, but because I've only got 1. I've got 2 notifications, but only 1 super chat that I can see. But cool. Yeah. So let's continue. So now you should be able to. Yeah, you can see the super chat.
Is worth X many people having well-being, because there's no need to create well-being for me, just only to prevent suffering. MJ says, I had epilepsy when I was younger, had kidney stones, wish I'd never gone through it. Vegan Bambi says, making the best of a bad situation doesn't make that life worth it. Yeah, agreed. Like,
exactly. Just because you can create meaning and do something good with your life doesn't mean that you should start another one.
I do think it's a callous mentality of parents when people just say, like, you can just do this to get over it, or depression is one of the common ones. Without depression, you can just take some meds, kind of thing. The idea is, I don't think a child should be in that situation in the first place. Vegan Pixie Warrior, hey Rebecca, how you doing? Says, I was born with a heart defect that caused me trauma my whole life. Sorry to hear about that, Rebecca. Vegan Bambi, no one thinks the kid is going to be the unfortunate one.
Exactly, so much optimism.
I want to see some pro-natalist comments here. I think I had a few from Rosita, but I think it's mainly anti-natalist in the comments.
Because they know you.
We're not actually getting many questions and stuff, Emily. So if people want...
Yeah, Linda's just said, Lawrence, your picture is up high. Yeah, I've put myself up high so that I don't block the messages he's bringing up, because he's going to be bringing up more now that they're doing questions. But what I will do is bring myself back into the middle and then increase the size a bit more. Is it going to play ball? There we go. Boom.
Put in some questions, super chat priority, but if people want to ask us some questions, if you want to put me on the spot, if you want to put Emily on the spot, feel free to do that. Kingdom Truth, oh, we totally take you seriously. Look at that profile. This guy's anti-babies. I'm not anti-babies, I'm anti-life, I'm anti-procreation. Let's have a look. Here's a good one. Wally Blue. All right, Emily, what compelled Emily to have a baby?
So
I feel like she's covered that. But obviously people might have joined late. And I could have sworn Olawally's in the chat here. So Olawally, you're getting represented twice.
it's kind of hard to say because I've been wanting to have a baby since I was like 16. I've known that I wanted to have children from when I was a teenager. And I've just like, it's just this one, like there's a few reasons. One, there's like a strong maternal urge to have children. And another thing is like that, well, I love babies. I love babies and I love the idea of raising children. And that's just something that I've always really enjoyed doing. And I don't know, I just find immense happiness in having
this is what I meant by like being a slave, right? Like being a slave to your biological urges or your hormones.
Like in being with children and having my own and getting to decide how she's going to be raised. It's just overall happiness, I guess.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Emily. This is a good one here from Rosita. Rosita, what caused you to come to such a dark place, George? I'm shocked. Well, I consider myself generally a pretty, like, I'm not a super dark, you know, I'm not some kind of emo or something like that. Like, I still experience joy and stuff like that. But if you're talking about what made me become a realist and realize that, like, life sucks, it was me being vegan. Before I was vegan, I was very pro-human. I thought humans were this great thing for the planet. Then I watched footage of the animal holocaust. I tried to convince people to go vegan, and I assumed people would go vegan, and it just failed. I thought everyone would go vegan. I thought I would just show people what happens to the chicks being shredded alive in the hatchery, and people would change. I then realized that humans are not the nice species that we say we are. We cause a lot of abuse and suffering, and people literally don't care. You can show them all the footage that you want. You can make all the convincing arguments that they want, they don't care. I then came across Gary Yourofsky shared some raps by the animal liberation and antinatalist rapper Mistro on his Facebook page. So I was loving his songs, and I got looking into antinatalism as a result of that, all the horrific things.
Is that Gary Yourofsky?
Yeah, Gary Yourofsky.
Hey, Gary.
He shared a rapper called Mistro back in the day. He was an antinatalist and animal liberation rapper. And yeah, I, as a result of Mistro's work, I became very disillusioned with kind of humans, the fact that our existence causes so much harm on this planet. And from there, I also got looking into the suffering we experience as humans and how it's just not worth our parents risking gambling with our lives like that, toying with our lives when we can, and just shoving us into the foray of rape and torture and death. So I became an antinatalist in about 2015. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Rosita. My wife Rachel's in the comments. She says, I love babies too, but I'm not selfish. Ivy says, can't wait to make a
Oh, that was a bit of a jab.
proper comment about this when this is uploaded as a proper video. I agree with everything George is saying, although I do sympathize with Emily's feelings. Okay, good one here from Deborah. As a vegan, how does Emily justify bringing another human into the world who will intentionally or unintentionally cause animal suffering?
I think we already went through that.
I guess we did, but you're in the hot seat now with the comments, Emily, so...
Okay, so again, I will... Oh, okay, so we'll go on, like, I already kind of covered that intentionally. Unintentionally. I mean, like, again, I think there's going to be animal suffering whether humans exist or not. So I still think, obviously, like, I prefer to not, like, obviously I try to do as least amount of harm to animals and to humans as possible while I'm here. But again, I do believe in, like, having children and that it's an intrinsic value, brings value to people's lives. And, like, that's the whole point of life, I guess. I don't know. It's hard to explain.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, by the way, Emily, for doing this live stream, because I know you're kind of in the hot seat there as an expectant mother, and it's kind of a bit at you or whatever. We've got another one here that's good, so I appreciate you facing these comments. Will you feel guilty, Emily, if your daughter develops a severe mental illness or health problem you couldn't foresee?
So as far as mental illness goes, no, because I'm mentally ill myself and I still love my life. And so, like, I think it's sad if they get, like, severe mental illness and everything, but I won't feel guilty. And health problem, I don't know, like I know some, like one of my best friends, she has a really bad health problem, and yeah, like she has suffered a lot because of that, but ultimately she does want to, like she does enjoy life, and she has her moments just like everybody else, like where you have good and bad.
Okay, cool. All right, Has Vegan says, life is beautiful and precious. How you doing, Has? I agree with you that it's precious once we come into existence. I think we have a strong interest in wanting to stay alive, as do animals, which is why I see murder as an abhorrent crime. I don't think life is beautiful. I think there's many beautiful moments in life, many beautiful moments, but life overwhelmingly is not beautiful. You're going to be chained to an office desk or whatever for most of your life, or for the animals that we murder and abuse throughout our lives before we're vegan, it's certainly not beautiful. Yeah, overwhelmingly, I'd say life is very ugly, cruel, but our brain is, due to optimism bias, we trick ourselves into seeing it as overwhelmingly beautiful, just as a survival mechanism, as a coping mechanism.
But life is in the brain, really.
There you go.
Life is in the brain, though. Like, it's all about our perception of reality, not what reality like is. It's how we feel about it.
Rebecca here, who's an adoptive parent, says, I just want to say that being a parent...
I feel like that whole thing of like reality is what you make it. Like to some extent it's true, but it's also like quite a shallow it's quite a shallow thing to say in and of its, like on its own in this context, just because like there are some harms that may befall your child which are just not a matter of like, it's just how you see life. Like, imagine if your child, if they get, like, some gruesome form of cancer where they bite off, like, they have spasms and bite off their own tongue, or they have cluster headaches, something like that. Like, those aren't just things that you can, like, perspective shift away, if you get what I mean.
It's the hardest and most frustrating job I've ever had. Don't get me wrong, I love my kids, but it's not easy. Yeah, it's another thing to actually take into account, actually, for vegans who want to have kids. And Rebecca did this as an activist, and credit to her, she's still doing activism and stuff. But there are so many vegans who actually have kids, and they don't understand how hard it is and how frustrating it is and how challenging it is. And Rebecca could tell you that, Vegan Pixie Warrior.
She adopted.
Yeah,
she we talked about it ages ago.
And it's amazing she's still doing activism. But what I was just saying is, there is a lot of vegans who don't consider just what a massive task it is. I don't think they weigh it up. And unfortunately, a lot of vegans drop out of activism as a result of having kids. So guys, if you are choosing to adopt, procreate, or whatever, just know, Rebecca will tell you, it's very hard.
I think when the kids are little, you kind of drop off, but then as the kids get older, you can come back onto it and everything. So.
Olawali Blue says, the Has, who said life is beautiful, people that commit suicide and have debilitating illnesses would beg to differ. Yeah, I agree. I do agree that life is, as I say to Has, I agree it's precious once we're here. We want to stay alive, and murder is wrong, but I don't think it's beautiful overall. Rebecca says, I'm already bringing up my adopted kids to adopt and not pop. Wow, so a vegan and an antinatalist parent, sort of there all in one. So,
what a lad.
So that's interesting.
Or a ladette.
After Rosita says, congrats, Emily. I'm excited for you. I'm glad that you didn't go the antinatalist route. Did you want to answer that?
Yay, thank you. Thank you, yes. Yeah, I think that, as much as, the thing is that in the West, at least, people are having less children, so there is less children to adopt. So if you, like for Pixie Warrior, if you are teaching your children to adopt, then just let them know that, like, there may be a chance that they might not get a child. So sort of thing.
Yeah. And Rosita,
also to save up and, as you would know, save up and apply young.
Yeah, and I get on well with Rosita. So Rosita, if you want to reach out for me to either come on for a live stream and discuss antinatalism, or you want me to just send you the stuff that I saw that made me become an antinatalist in the first place, I'm happy to do that. But there's a whole world of literature and shit that I guess a lot of people should look into, because I guess to the average person, antinatalism is going to sound a bit crazy, a bit wacko. It probably did to me before I came across it, because, I thought like everyone, life is amazing and who wouldn't want the gift of life, whatever. But then I came across the arguments and I'm no longer convinced. I think this guy sounds like a carnist, this Seamus C. This woman seems to have a natural happiness to her, which is surprising for a vegan. But I'm glad she hasn't embraced the full anti-human mentality of hating life. I assume this dude's a carnist, whatever. We can be happy as vegans, Seamus, but we just acknowledge the bullshit that you lot cause on this planet by putting animals through a fucking Holocaust every day. I don't know if you want to answer anything with regards to that.
Yeah, I do think that there is a very big correlation between being vegan and being anti-human. But I also, as you already pointed out, there's a big correlation between being vegan and being like left-wing as well. So
Fair enough. All right. And then Vegan Bambi says, why did she go the donor route, and how much does she know about the donor when it comes to their health history and looks? Is he a good-looking guy, Emily?
He's all right. Yeah, I mean, I believe that beauty is subjective. So when you say like, so I went down the donor route because I couldn't find a partner, and I was just getting sick of dating. And if you want to check out more like of my whole story, I have it on my Substack, which goes down. Like I haven't mentioned that I haven't mentioned on there that I'm pregnant and that I'm becoming a single mom by choice.
I don't know her Substack. Let's see if we can find it. We won't read through it all, but I'll just see if I can find it. We can maybe see like the first paragraph or whatever. Emily Walsh. If she lays out like her whole story. So, she doesn't have it linked on her YouTube. Slightly Crazy Vegan Substack. No. Emily Walsh Substack. Is that it? No, I can't find her Substack. Let's just continue.
Yet, but I have, but I do talk about.
Hang on a minute, something weird's going on with my There we go.
Like my dating history and why it's been so hard and everything like that. And then how much does she know about the donor? So we're like, okay, so I met him off of a website. I met him off of a Facebook group called.
This sounds a lot like, have anyone in the chat seen, there's a thing on Netflix at the moment, or at least it's on UK Netflix, called The Man Who Has 1,000 Kids, or more than 1,000 kids. And it's about this guy in the Netherlands who gamed the system. He gamed the system and went outside the system of sperm donation, like the official system, and he met lots of women on like they were either like single women or lesbian couples, or like a woman in a couple but like the man's infertile, and he like donated sperm to them and even had sex with some of them because he was like, the natural way of donating sperm. And yeah, and it turned out that he would always tell them that like he's only going to donate to like a few couples or people, but it actually turned out that he donated to like thousands, or like maybe not thousands, but like yeah, like over 1,000. I haven't finished the series yet, but yeah, it's kind of an interesting, I mean, it's messed up, but it's like an interesting series. I think there's only 3 parts, and like her story actually sounds quite similar to a lot of the women in the documentary about how they went online, found a guy to do it off the books and stuff. Yeah.
Sperm Donation Australia, where they go on this group and then they offer donations and people come for donations. There's a bit of surrogacy in there, and just like anyone like looking to have children need like egg or sperm donations or whatever. And then they have so I met my donor in real life, obviously, because otherwise how would I have done it? But I met up with him and we had dinner and everything, and then I decided that he seemed really nice, and yeah, we've kind of continued a friendship since then. Health history, I wasn't too like, he told me that he hadn't. Okay, so my donor actually was raised in the foster care system.
This is getting like very like personal and like sort of like, yeah, I don't know, I feel a bit weird about this bit of it, about her like sharing all this stuff, but I mean, if she's willing to do it, she's willing to do it. But yeah,
which is why he wants to assist in people having children, because he believes that family is really important, and he can't wait to have his own family, and that's because he didn't have a family growing up, and so it's like he's gone down like the opposite way, I guess, to Antinatalist. So I think that yeah, so he doesn't really know much about. He doesn't know his dad at all, like his biological dad. He doesn't. He has other siblings that he kind of knows, and his mum, and his health history is like, I think I don't think he has anything serious or major in his health history, but he obviously he's healthy as well, so he doesn't have any issues. And as far as looks go, well, I know what he looks like, and I believe beauty is subjective, so I didn't really go off, if I thought he was like hot or whatever, because I don't believe that. I believe that it depends on like how well you look after yourself and other people's personal dating preferences to how attractive you are, if that's what you were going with.
Cool, right. I've got a whole load of questions I've starred here so I can keep track of them. So
my cat is trying to like, hang on, Tiggy, you didn't come in. Oh, I let her in.
I'll answer this one quickly while Emily's out. George, are you going to see Pro Extinction? I'm not sure I know about it, so yeah, let me know about that. Okay. Oh, very cute. All right. There's one for you, Emily. Vegan Pixie Warrior asks, she mentioned earlier that she won't allow her daughter to suffer. How will she prevent this?
I didn't say that I won't allow her to suffer. I meant like I will be doing like everything I can possibly to not have her suffer. I think I can't remember what that was, like what my
thing is, like, every prospective or like actual parent says this about their child, like, I'm going to do everything I can to not let them suffer. And yet we have a world full of people suffering and like many, many children in brutal situations. Just like, when will people learn?
Point was, but if it was, I considered how she was, like how she'd be raised and all that. So that was just to say that I wasn't selfish, because I did consider everything involved. So not sure.
Cool. All right. Jeremy says, would you antinatalists feel guilty if you took someone to the hospital to fix their broken finger, but a car unexpectedly hit them on the way, causing crippling chronic pain? That's totally disanalogous, Jeremy. They're already in existence, and you're taking this risk for their own interest. Before someone exists, there's no interest in them coming into a world of risks, a world of cars hitting them, a world of finger breakings. So if you're comparing something accidentally happening to someone you're trying to help who already exists to forcing someone into a world of harm and rights violations and all these things that you need to do once they exist, then I'd just say that's totally disanalogous. Has Vegan says, another world is possible. The current state of the world is responsible for a lot of the pessimism. Not that having kids is a solution, but it's also not the cause of mass harmful ideologies. Well, in order for these ideologies to exist, humans need to exist. So, yeah, is another world possible? I don't know. We're trying while we can to fix that, but it's not working very well. So this is why I just think that, yeah, we can try as much as we can while we're here to do something. But ultimately, I don't have maybe the optimism that you has. Did you want to say anything on that, Emily?
Yeah, like having less people won't fix, won't make people behave better. So.
Okay, cool. All right. Josh Banks says, are there alternative solutions that can be put in place to minimize suffering other than ending the human race, i.e. raising a vegan nation, technological improvements, or societal change? Yeah, that's...
I feel like all of that sort of stuff is just like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, It's still fundamentally sinking.
What we're trying to do.
But obviously, like, whilst we're still on the Titanic, which humans will be, obviously, like, we should rearrange the deck chairs in whatever the best way we can. But ultimately, we should stop bringing people onto the Titanic while it's sinking.
I guess this is what we're all ultimately trying to do. I just don't see having procreating as some kind of way to do all this. I think we should, with the humans already in existence, I think we should come up with solutions. Emily?
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm pro-natalist, so I believe, like, life is awesome. And yeah, obviously there's people that do suffer and stuff, and that's unfortunate, but majority of the time people have pretty good life. And yes, we should be obviously raising a vegan nation and be trying to improve that, improve life over time. Yeah.
Yeah, how is the question to raise a vegan nation, but that's what we're trying to do. All right, Flores says, what do you both say to this pragmatic point? It's beneficial for the vegan movement to make more vegan babies. The Christians and Muslims are doing it. There's no such thing as a vegan baby. If you have a kid, Flores, you have no idea if they're going to grow up to be a vegan.
You can say for Christianity, but it's most likely if they're going to be raised in a certain way, then they're going to be more likely to be vegan than a Christian or Muslim.
Yeah, well, I just want to say why I think the Christian-Muslim point is actually disanalogous here. The reason that Muslims, for example, can actually increase their numbers by having kids is because they instill in their child a fear of hell from day one. They say, this is the religion, this is the facts, this is the truth. This is Allah, your God. This is the Quran. This is a factual. You can't disagree with it. If you disagree with it, you'll burn in hell in a lake of fire for all eternity. So that is how a child is trapped within religion from day one. Veganism doesn't have that fear factor. Flores, if you were to have a kid, you could raise them vegan all you want, but if they don't give a fuck, they don't give a fuck. They're not going to be punished for it. Society's going to actually reward them for not being vegan. So you might as well just adopt. And also, we see this time and time again that notable animal rights activists have kids and they grow up to not be vegan, or something happens, or their kid says, I want to eat what the other kids eat. It just doesn't work in the same way. So every vegan activist, you know, Flores, who you admire, comes from non-vegan parents. Every single...
I don't think that's what he means. I think what he means is that, like, the Christians and Muslims are having children and raising them non-vegan, especially Muslims.
What he's saying, he's saying that the Christians and Muslims are making babies and those babies are Christian and Muslim, like to increase their numbers, and therefore
no. I think what he means is there's a lot of Christians and Muslims that are creating, like, that are having lots of children that are non-vegan. So it would be good to have, like, you know, children and raise them vegan.
But I mean, adding one additional vegan is not taking away from the Christian or Muslim population. So wouldn't it be better to spend all of the money, lots and lots of money and time and energy that you're going to put into raising one vegan who might not even stay vegan? Wouldn't it be better to put that into efforts that are either going to convert Christians and Muslims into becoming vegan, whether they stay Christian or Muslim or not, or helping engage in projects which will sort of like force their hands, like legal changes or technological changes like lab-grown meat, or making plant-based like meats more available or better or more accessible, all this sort of stuff. Like, why would having a vegan child be the best way to go about that?
Yeah, unfortunately for us, that could be your child who grows up to.
And you've got to remember, like, you've got all the philanthropic concerns, like these justifications that are being put forward are trying to justify the suffering, harm, death that is being imposed on your child, right? And if the considerations aren't great enough, which they don't seem to be at all, then how does it in any way justify it?
Not be vegan. So you might...
And a lot of Christians grow up to not be Christians.
Yeah.
And Muslims grow up to not be Muslims.
All right. Let's go into this one from Lawrence here. Now, Lawrence says, would Emily see herself as at least partly responsible for all the harms that befall her child once they exist, given she ultimately created them knowing all these things could happen?
I mean, yes, but I can also say the same thing about her joy as well, and her accomplishments and all the good things that happen for her is because of my, like, being responsible, and not just for the fact that I brought her into existence, but the fact that I'm prepared to give her a life where I, you know, raise her with love and kindness, and I want to teach her things from a young age so that she's well equipped. I'll be responsible for that as well. You take responsibility for everything.
So on the surface, that sounds like reasonable to the average person. But essentially what she's saying is she is going to impose like harm, death, suffering on an innocent person, right? That never needed to be imposed on them. And she's appealing to other experiences, positive experiences, that person didn't even exist to want in the first place. They didn't exist to want or need it, but you're creating them to then want and need that stuff and then provide them with it, with the pain of the harm that you're imposing on them alongside that. That just seems so messed up to me.
Okay, Flores says, wokeism destroys the meaning of veganism, spreads mental illness, and alienates sane people who should be vegan. Agree. Antinatalism among vegans similarly makes veganizing the world much more difficult. I actually don't see any evidence for that, Flores, for that second statement. I actually think it would make veganizing the world easier if we can sensibly reduce the amount of people in the world so that fewer farmed animals are brought into existence. If we can spread our ideas to already existing people without creating new potential carnists, then I don't see any real argument that veganizing the world is going to be more difficult by being antinatalist. Again, it's just a massive... There's no real data, I don't think, to say that vegans procreating makes a more vegan world. Vegans have always procreated throughout history, and it hasn't, as a result of that, made the world any more vegan. I think most of us here are vegan, actually, because we were raised non-vegan and we came across something that made us go vegan. I don't think any of us here in the comments have been created from vegan parents. So
it hasn't like been that long veganism though, because I think it came out more in the 50s, right?
Well, the vegan society was created in the 1940s, but vegans have existed throughout history for thousands of years. We have like the work of Al-Ma'ari, for example, and we have the people in ancient
Who was an antinatalist as well.
Greece who would have been known as like the Pythagoreans, for example. But the vegan, the word vegan, as we know, was coined in the 40s by the Vegan Society.
Yeah, but there's also like a lot more food in certain cultures that are vegan friendly because of that reason, right? Like there's a lot more traditional dishes and stuff, so it'd still be good. Like it still helps. Like in like India, like Indian food, a lot of it is vegetarian or vegan food, so it's still like good. Like, because I can go to an Indian restaurant and potentially get something vegan. Whereas like if I go to like an Australian or American type restaurant, I mean obviously times have changed now, but before it was like salad and a crappy one at that.
Okay, Steve Lives says, my life has been horrific. I'm pretty sure my mother didn't want me to suffer either. Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, Steve, that you were put in that situation. And I guess everyone who's a natalist who says, you know, but my life has been good, I would just say it's an unfair.
Yeah, exactly. Like appealing to your own life experience is no way to make a calculation on how the child you create is going to live.
Kind of trade-off, and that there's always going to be people who have just ultimately horrific lives, even if their parent says to them, says about them, don't worry, I'll ensure that they have the best life possible. Did you want to counter anything on that, Emily, at all?
I mean, it just depends on your perspective.
So only 2 minutes left, everyone. We've been going for a long time, but 2 minutes left.
I don't really know what he means by horrific. Like, does that mean like physically or mentally, stuff like that?
Cool. Context. All right, let's have a look at some of. Trump said the weather is a Chinese hoax. Is this true? I don't know what that has to do with it, but I thought I'd flash that up. Let's see if there's anything else. Okay, yeah, I don't think there's that many more questions.
I am starving anyway. It's been like 2 hours and I need to have something to eat.
Awesome, me too. All right.
Okay, I think they are finished there. Okay, so that is the debate over. That was a long one. It was a marathon. Don't go away straight away because I do have one thing to share with you all before we finish. So let me find that. But yeah, while I'm finding that, why doesn't everyone let me know in the chat, how did you find that debate? Did you think that Emily had any good points? I know that most of the people in the chat will be antinatalist, but did you think that she had any good points? Let me know. Okay, so what I wanted to show you was, so here we're on my channel. Let me just move myself around. I think my laptop's working quite slow because of the heat. It's quite a hot day today. So here's my channel. And just while we were streaming, a new video has come out. So maybe some of you saw this one where I spoke to a pregnant woman. In this one, I speak to a mother about antinatalism. It's quite an interesting conversation. So she was very reasonable, you know, she just wanted to understand. But obviously she was already a mother, so I could understand if she was defensive because she's done something that I'm criticizing. But yeah, everyone definitely go check that out. I will get a link to it and put it in the chat. Yeah, feel free to comment on that video and let me know what you think. Boom, I've put that in the chat. But yeah, so there's if the stream is ending, but if you're not done yet, you can go onto that video and check that video out of me talking to a mother. Yes, I just want to say thank you everyone who supported, who sent in super chats and donations. Thank you so much for that. It really helps support the channel. Thank you everyone for being in the chat. We've consistently had about between sort of 50, 55 people watching, which is pretty cool. And obviously George and Emily were in the chat at one point. But thank you everyone for engaging. Thank you everyone for joining, and the donations. I hope you enjoyed the stream and the debate between George and Emily, and I will see everyone in the next video or live stream.